Live coverage of the 2024 primary election.
Welcome, everybody, to our very special streaming coverage tonight of the March primary. Polls are now officially closed. Here in Illinois, we will be keeping a very close eye on the results as they come in and update you on where things stand throughout the evening.
Our team of reporters out covering the race for Cook County State's Attorney, congressional races, the Bring Chicago Home referendum. Look at them all and so much more.
Lot to get into tonight. We're also watching the national picture, everybody. Arizona, Florida, Kansas, and Ohio also have primaries tonight, but we began tonight with our very own local races.
And one of the biggest races tonight is for Cook County State's Attorney. And current State's Attorney Kim Foxx announced last year she would not run for re-election.
Democrats Clayton Harris III and Eileen O'Neill Burke are fighting for the Democratic nomination. Bob Fioretti running unchallenged on the Republican side. Andrew Charles Kopinski is on the Libertarian ticket.
We have live team coverage for you from both Democratic candidate events tonight. And let's start with political reporter Craig Wall, who's with Clayton Harris III's campaign. Good evening, Craig.
Good race. Clayton Harris was making a lunchtime stop today at Valois Restaurant in Hyde Park, joined by Preckwinkle and other Democrats. Harris is a one-time prosecutor and current public policy lecturer at the University of Chicago. He has touted his progressive policies and diversified background on the campaign trail, balancing voters' concerns about a prosecutor's office battling a perception of being soft on crime with the social justice movement. Today, Harris making a series of campaign stops from the southwest suburbs all the way downtown, urging voters to go to the polls. His campaign message has been he can bring both safety and justice to the office.
We want people to know that we're intimately familiar with both safety and justice, and we're focused on that. That has been my stump speech the whole time, is that we can do more than one thing at a time. We can be safe and just at the same time. So we hear and understand people that are worried about the carjackings, the smash and grabs or whatnot, but we also understand that people are worried about, the administration of justice. So we're focused on both.
Clayton Harris, according to his campaign folks, is not expected to be here until later, but they have set up for him in the back room over there a special place for he, his family, and campaign staff to watch the results come in. He has done all he can now with the polls being closed. He's going to have to wait and see what the voters decide. This race really can be summarized perhaps as a referendum on Kim Foxx's policies, and we'll have to see if how he's balanced that is enough to win the voters and get them into office. Talk to you back later.
Craig, we look forward to talking to our political consultants about that issue as well. We'll see you again a little bit later tonight.
All right, great job, Craig. And let's go now to Sarah Schulte, who is with the O'Neill Burke campaign. What's the latest there, Sarah?
Well, Cheryl, O'Neill Burke's election party will probably begin in a half hour or so. The campaign wanted to make sure that all of their supporters were at the polls, getting people to the polls, given the fact that this election is so close. So many supporters were there until closing time. O'Neill Burke ran as the candidate of change and also as the candidate with the most experience. She often reminds people about her over 30 years of experience in all sides of the courtroom. She is a former prosecutor, defense attorney, circuit court judge, and since 2016, an appellate court judge. O'Neill Burke says the justice system is simply not working. She plans to transform the state's attorney's office by recruiting lawyers from all over the country. Now, similar to Clayton Harris, O'Neill talks about achieving safety and justice together. She supports the No Cash Bail Safety Act and restorative justice.
We are going to prosecute violent crime and keep people safe, but we're also going to focus on restorative justice. That means people who are nonviolent felons, we're going to have programs that are going to get them turned around and back to productive citizens.
Their video. The one issue that she and Harris differ on is how to prosecute retail theft. Burke O'Neill plans to follow the state law and return the threshold for felonies from $1,000 to $300. Kim Foxx changed it. Again, the election party here is about to begin in about 15 minutes. Again, this is likely to be a very close election. Live in the Loop, Sarah Schulte, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you.
All right, Sarah, thank you for that update. We'll be checking in with you later on tonight.
Well, one of the most controversial measures on the ballot tonight involves the Chicago real estate transfer tax, and we're talking about the Bring Chicago Home referendum.
Well, that referendum would raise the transfer tax on properties over $1 million. The city says that money would be used to help fund Chicago's unhoused population, but The measure has been fiercely contested in court by a coalition of real estate and development groups.
ABC 7's Liz Nagy live tonight where supporters of the referendum are gathering. Liz.
Rob, forgive the echo in the room. It's still empty here. That will subdue as volunteers start to come in. The reason this room is still empty is because a large army of progressive volunteers have been out across the city all day long, trying to drum up as many votes as they possibly can at the last minute to get people to go out and support this Bring Chicago Home referendum. It's a three-part question on just the Chicago City ballot that addresses a real estate property increase to a tax there, but it's something that has been hotly contested in court. This is how it works.
This is the full court press to closing time. The progressive army of union workers, public school teachers, and advocates for Chicago's unhoused population are fanned out across the city in force, trying to drive up votes for the ballot referendum known as Bring Chicago Home. Here's how it works. The referendum proposes creating 3 tax brackets for property sales under $1 million, between $1 and $1.5 million, and over $1.5 million. Property sales under $1 million would see a slight transfer tax cut, while properties over $1 and $1.5 million would be taxed at an increased rate on revenue over the respective benchmark.
We're trying to equalize the tax burden, not on the rich. Put it on the rich because it's now on the poor and the middle income.
Progressive Democrats say that increased tax revenue will generate a multi-million-dollar fund for programs and affordable housing for people experiencing homelessness in Chicago.
We have 30,000 Chicago public schools, students that are homeless. And we also have other residents that are unhoused. And so we need the resources to be able to make sure that we respectfully house people.
But real estate developers, landlords, and business groups don't buy it.
The long-standing impact isn't just about affordable housing, it's about building communities, and we're not going to be able to do that with taxes like this.
Multi-million-dollar commercial real estate developers say is slogging through a pandemic-induced slump. The nonpartisan Civic Federation reviewed the proposed transfer tax increase and found
the downtown loop commercial real estate market will bear double the burden of what it previously or currently is bearing in relation to all real estate transfer taxes.
After an unsuccessful court battle to keep the transfer tax increase off the ballot, its fate could hinge on the small percentage of primary voters who weigh in.
Now, if that tax referendum passes in just a few hours tonight, it will then go to City Council. They will have to redraft an ordinance that determines things like how that money is spent and what metrics will keep an eye on how that money is being spent and who is spending it. In effect, this wouldn't happen until at least 2025. Now, real estate and development groups who have been very opposed to this and spent millions of dollars to try and fight and keep it off the ballot have not ruled out the possibility of trying to take this back to court, because many of them maintain that this question on the ballot, they say, was unconstitutional. We'll see what Chicago voters have to say on it as the polls close. We're live on the Northwest Side tonight. Liz Nagy, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Robin, Cheryl.
All right, Liz, thanks for sorting it out. We'll see if that echo goes away, as you mentioned, as more people arrive there. We want to take a look now at Illinois' 4th Congressional District race. That district covers part of the city's southwest side and extends out into the suburbs.
Democratic incumbent Congressman Chuy Garcia facing a primary challenge from Chicago alderperson Ray Lopez.
Our Leah Hope been covering this race all day for us. She's live at the Garcia campaign headquarters. Good evening, Leah.
Good evening, and we're in Brighton Park this evening. As you mentioned, this district is part of the southwest side and going to some of the western suburbs. So as you notice, some of those districts have interesting shapes, and this is one of those with an interesting shape. What's important to know about the 4th Congressional District is that it is mainly Latino, about 67% at the last census. And we do have Chuy Garcia as the representative, but he is being challenged. And both of these candidates are talking about issues of national importance that affect people locally. They're talking about immigration reform. They're talking about DACA and some final decisions for DACA recipients. And they're talking about money going to places like Ukraine and Gaza. Now, while they are talking about all these things, while they're talking to voters today, there was an issue that came up this morning.
4th Congressional District candidates greet voters on this primary day. The incumbent, Congressman Chuy Garcia, was elected in 2018, faces challenger Chicago Alderman Ray Lopez.
Lopez says today he brought donuts, coffee, and gave money to poll workers to buy lunch at 20 sites. But offering cash to poll workers now has the attention of the Attorney General's Election Integrity Unit, which confirms the office is looking into a complaint filed by Garcia about Lopez's gifts to poll workers.
I think that any time that cash is being spread around in a polling place on Election Day certainly suggests that there could be efforts to move Chicago backwards. Chicago ain't moving backwards.
This is a distraction when we should be talking about issues. He's had months to talk about things, and all he wants to talk about is the kinds of donuts I brought for breakfast.
So we'll see what happens with the Attorney General's investigation or inquiry, whatever they prefer to call it. Looking into it is how they termed it today. We'll see what comes of that. But of course, nothing is going to come of that today. What's going to happen today, likely, our voters are going to decide who will go on to the election. And of course, there's no one on the Republican side. So whether it will the incumbent who continues on or whether there might be new representation. So we will see. We are currently at a neighborhood cultural center in the Brighton Park neighborhood where we're waiting for folks to come in. Actually, we know it's a little bit early for a party and polls are just closing, but we haven't seen any of the folks trickle in. We expect to see them soon. The doors just opened here. So for now, we are live in the Brighton Park neighborhood. Leah Hope, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you in the studio.
All right, a little bit of political mudslinging and a food fight going on there, Leah.
Some donuts.
In that district,
Yeah,
you know.
A couple donuts, yeah.
All right, thanks so much.
Election results coming in. Oh, go ahead. Say that again, Michelle. Okay, the Associated Press has called President Joe Biden the winner here in the state of Illinois. No surprise there.
Yeah.
Not at all.
Right. Blue state here.
And we do have some results on we want to go to 11th Congressional District. Let's start. This is the first time we're seeing these. Here's the results first for the president. Now we go to the 11th District. There we go, incumbent Bill Foster with a sizable lead. But you can see not much of the results are in. So you see that gray 11th District box under U.S. House. Look to the far right there. And that'll be a good gauge of what's in as we tabulate these totals.
Perhaps maybe 1% of the voting.
If that, yeah, you can see down there, which is a few hundred. So Qasim Rashid behind there on the Democratic side. And here's the Republican primary for the 11th District. Jerry Evans holding a 52% lead to Susan Hathaway Altman. But like you said, Cheryl, he's just 144 votes for Mr. Evans and 107 for Hathaway Altman. So just starting to see these come in.
Just 13 minutes since the polls have closed, so anything can happen. We talked to Sarah, of course, and Craig and Liz, and we talked to Leah. And all of the locations, campaign headquarters are very quiet. People aren't there. But at this hour, 7:13 on this Tuesday primary election night, the AP is now confirming that President Joe Biden has won, projecting that President Joe Biden has won the state of Illinois over Marianne Williamson.
Yeah, almost 400 votes for Marianne Williamson. Some of this is a projection from the Associated Press, and here it is on the Republican side. Donald Trump, with 66% of the vote, has now secured enough delegates for his Republican Party to get that election, or to be now the front runner to take on current President Biden. And here's some new results here as well, Cheryl.
Let's talk about Mike Bost going up against Darren Bailey. Mike Bost, the incumbent, going up against a former Trump supporter, a present Trump supporter, Darren Bailey, who before he was a supporter of President Trump, but President Trump is now endorsing Mike Bost. And again, we said 8% of the vote in, 79% over 21% over Darren Bailey for the incumbent.
This is a fascinating race downstate because if you remember, Darren Bailey was the former Republican candidate for governor, but former President Trump has thrown his support to Congressman Bost. And Darren Bailey has not stopped saying he is a staunch Trump supporter and has been outspoken in that support for Mr. Trump. And you'll see if that makes this race a little closer. Some election experts think this one is going to be a lot closer than a lot of people think downstate. We want to keep an eye on that one for a lot
with
of
only 8% in so far, so it's early tonight.
So
it
is, yeah.
What should we do at this point? We should track everything that we can, of course, at the Chicago election headquarters, as we do all the time. Investigative reporter Chuck Gowdy live for us all the time at the Chicago Board of Elections. What's the latest? How is it going there, Chuck? I know you talked earlier about most of the issue was the low turnout.
Yeah. Right. That's still the story here, Cheryl. The polls have closed on one of the worst turnout days in Chicago election history. It could end up the lowest actual election turnout ever here, election day turnout. And across the Cook County suburbs in the state of Illinois come similar dismal reports of few voters. In Chicago, the day began weak, did pick up, but may leave candidates scrambling for answers.
We've been seeing a steady increase all day long, but it is still relatively low turnout for an election day, especially a presidential primary. This is much closer to our 2012 numbers that we saw, where we only saw 315,000 ballots cast for that presidential primary election. Ultimately, I think that we'll beat that many ballots cast, but we will have a low citywide turnout because we have much more registered voters. We have 1.7 million registered voters now. So we might be closer for a low 20s citywide turnout, but we do have vote-by-mail ballots that will ultimately be coming in today, as well as the next few days that will add to that turnout.
Vote tabulations now being transmitted to Election Central here in the Loop and counted. Perhaps the only two benefits of such a terrible turnout are that the results should be in fast and there were no substantial problems to report throughout the voting day. That's it from here.
All right, Chuck, I know you'll stay out there for us throughout the evening, and we will be checking back in with you throughout the evening. One of the segments we did here as we've done some of these continuous election coverage is having Judy sit down with some political leaders with their opinions to discuss some of the big issues that are on the ballot each election season.
And every time we always have an excellent panel of experts who are talking about analysis. And tonight joining Judy is the president and CEO of the Latino Policy Forum, is Sylvia Puente. She joins us again. Judy and Sylvia, welcome tonight to our primary election night coverage. And Chuck was talking about the low voter turnout. Let's start from there. How is that affecting the votes for the Latino policy?
Yeah, we are going to talk to Sylvia about that. Yes, super excited to be joining you guys tonight. We have local community leaders, civic leaders that are out there engaging the community every day, like Sylvia, to a political science professor who will be joining us here tonight. So Sylvia, let's dive right into it and talk about the low voter turnout. Chuck Gowdy earlier was just reporting shockingly low is what one person, kind of described it. What do you think about the low voter turnout?
Well, I think people vote when things matter to them. And what we already know, this is a presidential primary, and already it's a foregone conclusion on who our presidential nominees are going to be. What I think remains to be seen is the referendum on Bring Chicago Home, because we know that there was a lot of grassroots organizing and outreach around that. So it'll be interesting to see if that spikes the vote in any particular wards or any particular areas of the city.
I know there's one race you're watching very carefully tonight and have been and that is for the Illinois Supreme Court seat.
Yes.
Jesse Ruiz and Joy Cunningham, they call it a down ballot race because it is farther down on the ballot.
Right.
But you talk about the power of the vote. We're talking everyday citizens can decide who sits on the Supreme Court. It's critically important.
Well, and I would say, what's the Supreme Court? Which is what I think, regrettably, a lot of our voters and a lot of the folks in the trenches say, because they don't see how Supreme Court decisions impact their daily lives. And again, elections have to matter, and they have to matter to what does it actually mean for me. And so certainly I see the value, and I think many voters do see the value of understanding the significance of a Supreme Court that looks like the diversity of the state of Illinois. But in terms of its actual decisions, name me one Illinois Supreme Court decision that's been rendered in the past couple of years and who it impacted, right? There isn't a lot of visibility about it. There's a lot of publicity about it. But clearly that is a race where the Latino vote could make a substantial difference. Jesse Ruiz was campaigning very, very hard, but we do know that the incumbent, Joy Cunningham, really had the support of the Democratic Party. And all of the resources that entails.
And I don't know if we have those results coming in. I know it's still very early. If we have it, we can pull it up for you, and so you can take a look at it. Cunningham is only the second black woman to serve on the Illinois Supreme Court. Ruiz is really pushing for that Latino representation now on the court. So a lot of groundbreaking, elements there in that race. I do want to talk about the new report that was just released by the Latino Policy Forum. It is called Latino Voters Have the Power to Decide Elections. What did that report find about the strength of the Latino vote and how much it has grown?
Yeah, well, really, I think what's really most notable is that over the past decade, we saw an increase of 400,000 Latinos who are eligible to vote. Now, that doesn't mean that they're all registered, and it doesn't mean that they all came out to vote, but we have seen that electorate continue to grow. It's really being driven because we are a young population, there are about 30,000 Latinos who turn 18 every year in Illinois. Wow. Right? And it's also driven by the changing demographics. Over the past decade, we've also gone from 2/3 of Latinos being foreign-born, only 1/3 being U.S.-born, to now half of Latino adults have been born in the United States. So the electorate is growing. It's incumbent on all of us, including those running for office, to do outreach to get people motivated and excited enough to vote.
And you and I.
And one other thing I want to name about that is while our electorate is growing, the white population in Illinois is declining. So the number of the number of white voters and black voters has numerically declined in the state of Illinois. So we really have this transformation thing happening in the electorate.
And in terms of driving out the Latino vote, you and I have talked about this. That Latino vote is not a block. It is a very diverse population with diverse opinions and viewpoints. So going into November, for the general election, what do you think will drive that Latino vote?
Well, again, are the candidates speaking to the voters? Are the candidates have deliberate outreach to the voters? Are they being campaigned to in terms of not only what we get in the mail, but on Spanish language TV, which we know has been dismal in the amount of advertising revenue that's gone on Spanish language TV for that voting block. But I think, the Latino vote is not monolithic. It's very diverse across the nation. We know there are going to be some really key pivotal swing states where the Latino vote can really make a difference, like Arizona and Nevada, which can make a difference in the presidential election. And while even in Illinois we know the Latino vote is very diverse, for the most part we know that Illinois is a pretty blue state.
I know you'll be watching from now until November. We will be watching right along with you.
Thank you.
Sylvia Puente, President and CEO of the Latino Policy Forum. Always exciting to hear Sylvia's point of view. I'm going to send it back now to the desk.
Yeah, ladies, thank you so much. We appreciate the discussion. An update for you. Associated Press projecting that Donald Trump has secured the Republican nomination for president here in the state of Illinois. That's according to the AP. With the projection on Donald Trump, there is no surprise there. There are the numbers as they continue to come in. Still ways to go to get all those numbers tabulated, but the Associated Press projecting that for us tonight. And in the Democratic primary for Illinois' 7th District, incumbent Congressman Danny Davis facing challenges from 4 other people. And this district covers parts of Chicago and the western suburbs, too.
So for you tonight, we have teams across our area covering some of the Democratic campaigns for the 7th District. First, let's go to Karen Jordan, who's been at the Danny Davis campaign headquarters all day long with his story. Karen.
Well, Cheryl, we are here in East Garfield Park at the Westside Baptist Ministers Conference Center, where supporters are starting to trickle in now, hopeful that voters rallied behind Danny Davis at the polls. Davis' campaign's office, by the way, is just across the street, and that's where he is watching the returns. Now, earlier today, Davis himself took time to vote in the Austin neighborhood. He's hoping voters will send him back to Washington for a 15th term. He was first elected in 1996 and has become synonymous with the West Side. But this time, Davis is facing his toughest path to re-election from opponents who say it's time for a changing of the guard. Davis makes the case that his 28 years in Congress is an asset, enabling him to have influence in Washington. But his opponents are citing his age of 82 as a reason to vote in someone new. Keena Collins came within 6 points of unseating Davis in the last election, and she's running again, as is City Treasurer Melissa Conyers-Irvin. But earlier today, Davis said he feels energized by the feedback he is receiving from his constituents.
We need your experience. We need your longevity. We need your tenure. We need your understanding. And we need your ability to bring back resources.
Davis's supporters at this point not speculating what the low voter turnout today could mean for their candidate. There are 2 other candidates running on the Democratic side. Nikhil Bhatia, an educator, Corey Marshall, who worked for Governor J.B. Pritzker. Chad Coppey is running unopposed on the Republican side. That is the latest here at East Garfield Park. Karen Jordan, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you.
All right, Karen, thank you for that update tonight. It is still early and the votes are coming in. And speaking of votes, Let's look at some of the projections we have for tonight at about 7:25 as we stream. We're going to put some of the results on the screen here so we can take a look to see how everything is going.
We want to start with the state's attorney. This is a contested race, obviously, between the two candidates there on the Democratic side. They will go on to face either the Bob Fioretti, who is running unopposed on the Republican side, and then also another candidate. Here, these numbers are early. This is just in, and it looks like Eileen O'Neill Burke has 56% of the vote to 44% for Clayton Harris III. Fewer than, what, 20% in, not even 18%?
Yeah, already in. And of course, some were saying this is a referendum on Kim Foxx, who has decided not to run for office again. And as you said, Bob Fioretti will be facing the winner of this Democratic candidacy here. And let's talk about the clerk of the circuit court. Iris Martinez is the incumbent running against Mariana Spiropoulos. Early on, we have 18% in, but it says that projections right now 67% to Iris Martinez, the incumbent, 33% with 19,000 votes.
And these are real-time results coming in for us here as we take a look at these. So we're updating these in real time from the Chicago Board of Elections. And also one more, the big referendum that Liz Nagy was talking about, the Bring Chicago Home referendum. Here are some early results. 41%, 8,000, a little over 8,000 votes have said yes. 59%. More than 11,000 votes have said no, and not even 10% in.
Let's read partially how the question goes. Shall the city of Chicago amend the real estate transfer tax, reducing the tax on portions below 1 million and increasing the taxes on portions above 1 million? There have been pros and cons to this. Laura Washington, our ABC7 political expert, talking about low voter turnout tends to have this results with a yes for this binding referendum. So there are so many people against it, so many people for it, and people had their analysis and reasons why. So this is going to be very important, something that Mayor Brandon Johnson ran on his campaign when he ran for office. He has the backing, of course, of the CTU, and those who did not like it took it to court. So we're going to see how that works out tonight.
Remember how confusing it was, too?
Right.
And if you look at the sample ballot, I mean, this was on the last page, and there was a lot to get through. We'll see if that impacts this result as well.
It's at the end of the voting.
Yes,
and
right.
That really has a lot to do with how people did. Some people even vote for it.
We want to go back to the 7th District as we continue our team coverage there. Eric Hong is with the Melissa Conyers-Irvin campaign. She's the Chicago City Treasurer now, previously a state representative, but now trying to break into national politics here. Good evening to you, Eric.
Robin, Cheryl, 2 years ago, Melissa Conyers-Irvin supported the incumbent Danny Davis, but now she says he has failed the 7th District, in particular South and West Side communities that continue to see disinvestment. The 48-year-old former state representative is currently in her second term as Chicago City Treasurer and was born and raised on the West Side. Conyers-Irvin, who has an MBA and worked in the insurance industry for several years, has highlighted her background as a working mother and says she'll be a champion in Washington for working families. But her candidacy has been dogged by questions about the Chicago Board of Ethics finding of probable cause last year that she violated city ethics rules as treasurer by firing 2 top staffers who say she misspent taxpayer money and forced employees to run errands for her. Conyers-Irvin has denied those allegations and called them a distraction.
Because residents want to know, how are they going to keep food on their table? Residents want to know, how are you going to keep their families safe? Residents want to know, how are you going to control the rising costs of health care and prescription drugs? That's what residents want to know. And I'm the one for them.
Conyers-Irvin is married to Chicago Alderman Jason Irvin and has the backing of the Chicago Teachers Union. She's led in fundraising, but in a 5-candidate race with low voter turnout, unseating the incumbent could be a challenge. We'll have to wait and see tonight. I think we've got some early results that just came out, which currently show her in second place. We're live at Manny's Deli on the near west side. Eric Hong, ABC7 Eyewitness News.
Eric,
right.
thank you.
Eric, thanks so much for that. Now let's go to Evelyn Holmes. She is at the Keena Collins campaign headquarters. She's been covering her all day long. What is happening there where you are, Evelyn?
Well,
things just starting out here, really just setting up. But as you mentioned before, that things are positive in this respect when it comes to Kina Collins. Now, remember that she came a few years ago within 6 points of unseating the incumbent Danny Davis, and that has emboldened her to, of course, try again. Now, there are some major hurdles. With respect to financing, getting the support, the backing to run a substantial campaign. The other concerns that exist are some of the low voter turnout in those numbers. It's not, as we mentioned before, as we talked about, it's not just about who's turning out or what's turning out or the numbers, about who's turning out. Now, with a low voter turnout, that most likely will favor an incumbent. That's what some of the experts say, some of the pundits say, and that's what the concern is by the campaign. Now, of course, Kina Collins would say, listen, it is time for a new guard to go to Washington to represent the district with new ideas. She talks a lot about gun violence, a lot about being able to protect neighborhoods, being able to address some of the community issues. And as a progressive community activist, she has been able to effectively, she says, be able to kind of hear the people and move forward with that. None of these challengers have really effectively been able to say why they don't think Danny Davis would be the choice, but they have pointed to his age, and they've also pointed to the old guard, the things that have gone on for years and years, and now they say, well, it's time to do something different. It's time to take a different look at how to address some of the issues that go into governing on the south and west sides of the city. Now remember that in the district is a vast district. It runs from Chinatown to the south and west sides over into the west side of the city near the western suburbs. So you have a wide swath of individuals, and you have a wide swath of concerns that these different neighborhoods have to be addressed. And so some folks that are supporting Kina Collins say that she does bring a breath of fresh air, a new thought process to addressing some of those issues. Folks that would be her critics would simply say that she, at 33, she simply doesn't have the experience. Would also say that the incumbent has been there in Washington long enough to know how to work the levers of government, how to make sure that he brings those resources back to the community. Of course, all this is up for debate, and most likely we'll of course find out what folks really think after the polls have closed, and they already have, and the vote continues to be counted. Back to you guys.
Thanks so much for that, Evelyn, for that update. And several other people running against Danny Davis were longtime allies of his, of course, but now they've decided that they want a new generation of political leaders to run Chicago. So it will be interesting to see.
It's a crowded field, which is fascinating. It's not something we've seen in that district in quite some time.
And what's really important is how Evelyn said in the last election, there was only a 6-point difference between Kina and Danny Davis. And so she said that inspired her to keep going. This is her third time running for this office. So we'll see. Third time could be the charm for her.
It's going to be a close one, I think. A couple results we want to talk to you about, including the state's attorney's race. Here it is. These are live election results coming in now. 36% of the results are in, and you can see Eileen O'Neill Burke is holding a 10 percentage point lead over Clayton Harris III. Burke with about 67,000 votes, and Clayton Harris III with about 55,000 votes, and this is with 36% of the results in. Speaking of this race, Sarah Schulte is with the O'Neill Burke campaign. Sounds like things are starting to get moving there. We see some balloons behind you, so people are ready there.
That's right. People are starting to come in, and obviously you just said some of those numbers, so people are feeling pretty good right now about those numbers. As you know that O'Neill Burke certainly was not slated by the Cook County Democratic Party and Tony Preckwinkle. She is mainly supported by moderate Democrats and the business community, some people who are just fed up with crime. One of her biggest supporters is State Controller Susana Mendoza. Well, tell me why that you did support her.
Well, I thought it was very exciting that we had, for the first time in my entire lifetime, I'm 51 years old, and I don't know...
You're young, by the way. But
Thank you. 51 years young. I don't remember a time, at least in my recollection, right, where we've had such an experienced candidate running for such an important position. I mean, Eileen O'Neill Burke, there's just no comparison with her level of experience, what she brings to voters in terms as a candidate. 30 years of experience as a defense attorney, a prosecutor, a trial judge, and an appellate judge. And then, on top of that, she resigns from her appellate judgeship to run for this, because that's how important this race is. That's a level of sacrifice that I have not seen many politicians ever make, and it really piqued my interest in wanting to learn more about her. And so once I did, that was it. I was sold. She is an incredible candidate, and I hope that today these results continue to be positive for her, and Cook County and Chicago will have finally a state's attorney that is worthy of that title. You know, someone who's going to stand up for victims, someone who's going to be tough but fair and just. You can do all those things and deliver for the victims of crimes who expect a state's attorney who will have their back before you have the back of the perpetrator.
All right, great. Thanks so much. Appreciate it you joining us. Again, party is just getting underway, and so far the numbers are looking good. Live at the O'Neill Burke headquarters, Sarah Schulte, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you.
All right, Sarah, thank you for that. Political reporter Craig Wall is at the Clayton Harris III's campaign headquarters with the latest there. Craig.
Guys, we've seen a few people trickle in, a few supporters. There's actually a larger gathering you can't see behind there where all the food is being served. Not sure if they have yet seen the numbers that are coming in. There were a few more folks out here just a short time ago, and they have disappeared behind this wall behind me. We don't know when Clayton Harris is coming down here, but obviously these early returns would have to be a little disconcerting for them. One of the campaign people that I spoke to said they are looking for a really strong turnout from black voters on the south side. They typically older black voters typically tend to be some of the more reliable voters going to the poll. Clayton Harris spending a good amount of time out in that direction in the previous few days, trying to make sure they shore up where they think they can get a lot of support that are going to be needed. But we'll have to see how things play out through the rest of the evening. Live at the Harris campaign headquarters, Craig Wall, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Okay, Craig, thank you. We want to welcome in our political guest, Laura Washington, ABC 7 political analyst. Also, David Greising, Better Government Association, our better halves.
President.
Yes.
It's Old Home Week. It's nice to be back.
Welcome, family.
Yeah.
You know, we've got a lot to talk about, and we've got lots of hours to talk about. Welcome to primary election night. I guess let's just start out with the basic, the low voter turnout. How will it affect some of these real prominent races?
Well, so far it's looking like it's going to turn up some surprises. I think, at least in terms of where I thought the Bring Chicago Home vote was headed was in favor of it, and it looks like things can change, but it looks like it's going to be a no on that. Wow. Generally, in a low turnout race, that is helpful to incumbents. It's helpful to people who have high name recognition. It's helpful to people who have organizations, and all of that was in place for Bring Chicago Home in terms of Tony Preckwinkle, Brandon Johnson, all the other folks that were behind that. Didn't seem to work for them, at least so far.
And David, the age groups, it's always neat to see the breakdown of the age groups, and it seemed to be folks over 50 and even over 60 that have really come out strongly to vote during this primary. Does that then directly impact these results? Because some of those younger adults, those percentages are alarmingly low.
Well, and there was some talk ahead of this election that this was the election where the young people were going to show up, and we've been here a few years now saying the young people are going to show up. It should help some of the incumbents a little bit. People like Danny Davis, people who have many years voted for Danny Davis, probably all their voting lives, and it may have an effect, the fact that older voters are, relatively speaking, in this very low turnout scenario, turning out in bigger numbers than the younger voters are.
The average age of the voter, 55 years old. Dare I say that age has been a conversation this year in elections across the country. They've been talking about Danny Davis.
Danny Davis, of course.
Right, 82 years old.
And Joe Biden and
Joe Biden.
Donald Trump.
Exactly.
And it would be interesting if Danny Davis does pull it out tonight. That goes against the grain of the argument that voters are tired of these older people and they want the next generation. But the younger people who might be supportive of the next generation didn't show up at the polls. They're disenchanted, and so the older people are going to re-elect the Danny Davises and the Donald Trumps if you look at these.
You've got your tea, your coffee, whatever it is you need to
Great
get through the
coffee,
night. I
too.
hope you at home are
need it.
also doing that as well, getting settled after dinner with us as we continue our coverage.
Yeah, but for now, we're going to take a short break, everybody, to let our on-air audience join us. We're going to take a break. We'll be right back on the other side.
From ABC 7 Eyewitness News, your voice, your vote. This is a 2024 primary election update.
And good evening. We're getting some early results on this primary election night.
Yeah, thank you for joining us, everybody. In the race for Cook County State's Attorney Eileen O'Neill Burke with an early lead over Clayton Harris III in the Democratic primary.
And to the so-called Bring Chicago Home referendum, and so far the no vote leads in this effort to raise the transfer tax on properties over $1 million to help fund Chicago's unhoused population. There are the numbers as they come in, just a little bit fewer than 50% already in.
Yeah, we'll be following that all night very closely. Now to the race for Congress in the 7th District. Incumbent Danny Davis running for his 15th term and leading right now his 4 challengers.
Grab your phone, scan that QR code on your screen, or head to our website for continuing coverage of tonight's primary races.
And you can also find the latest streaming tonight. We'll see you there.
Well, welcome back to our special edition night coverage on our ABC 7 Chicago stream. We appreciate you being with us tonight.
Yeah, we're going to go to the race for the Cook County Circuit Court Clerk. The incumbent, Iris Martinez, is facing a challenge in the Democratic primary from Mariana Spiralopoulos. Martinez took over the office in 2020.
Now let's take a look at these results. They're just coming in right now. This winner will face Republican Lupe Aguirre and Libertarian Michael Murphy in the general election. It looks like 68% already in. And Mariana Spiralopoulos has a sizable lead.
Almost double, more than double the lead of votes here with the incumbent Iris Martinez, of course, who made history as the first Latina to hold this office when she was elected. John Garcia, Rob Hughes standing by tonight, both at the Democratic candidates' campaign headquarters tonight. Let's start with John Garcia. John.
Cheryl, disheartening results that we're seeing so far for Iris Martinez and her supporters who are here at this Northwest Side location, ready for a party, but it's kind of a somber mood at the moment as we're seeing these results come in. As you know, Iris Martinez was not endorsed by the Democratic Party either in this election or when she first won the race 4 years ago when she beat out a field that was replacing and retiring Dorothy Brown, who held the office for many years. She did not get the party's endorsement this time around either, as you know. That is very unusual for an incumbent. She is, as you said, the first Latina ever to hold the office, but she faces a very difficult battle tonight. As we're seeing, she has raised only a very small percentage of the amount of money her opponent has raised, but she says she feels confident running on her record. She says the last 4 years she has modernized the clerk's office, digitizing some 70 million files of court records. In the office, she oversees some 1,400 employees and is responsible for keeping files and records for some 400 judges in the Cook County court system.
I feel confident that I've done whatever I can, and at the end of the day, the voters are going to decide, who deserves to stay there or a new administration coming in.
Martinez is a veteran politician. She was a state senator for 17 years, and she's held this office for 4 years. She was obviously ready for a party tonight. The mood, however, a little bit somber, as we mentioned. We'll see what happens the rest of the night. For now, live on the Northwest Side, John Garcia, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you.
John, thanks. We're going to guess where Rob Hughes is. Live at the Mariana Spiralopoulos campaign. Things are a little more lively. He's in the Greektown neighborhood with us tonight. Hey, what's going on, Rob?
Well, Rob, that's exactly how I would describe it. It's a little more lively than the scene that John Garcia just painted for us a couple of minutes ago. We are in the West Loop ahead of what Mariana Spyropoulos hopes is an election night celebration, and it is starting to look like that may be the case indeed. Iris Martinez, as John mentioned, is the incumbent in the race for the clerk of the Circuit Court of Cook County, and this typically would be a fairly low-stakes evening for an incumbent in this position. However, Martinez facing, as you know, a strong challenge from Spyropoulos, thanks in part to Spyropoulos' endorsement from the Cook County Democratic Party and Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle. Spyropoulos has 25 years experience as an attorney, 13 years as a Water Reclamation District Board member. She's raised more money than her opponent and believes the clerk's office needs a new face.
This is about making this office work. There's a lot of dysfunction and mismanagement currently. People really don't know what the office does, so it was our job to get that message out there.
And to her point there, the clerk of the Circuit Court of Cook County is responsible for managing court records for the second largest court system in the United States. We're talking about 24 million case files, more than 1,400 employees, a significant responsibility, certainly, to handle those files efficiently and responsibly. Again, we're back here live at the party, the election night celebration, as Mariana Spyropoulos hopes that'll be what it is and turns out to be, as she has a sizable lead right now. We're starting to feel the excitement from her supporters here. Live in the West Loop, we'll send it back to you guys in the studio. Rob,
Rob, it sounds like they've heard the results or seen them on the screen as you watch us stream. So, yeah, a little bit of energy there as the night continues. Thanks. I know we're going to be going back to you in just a little bit.
Right. We're 47 minutes after the polls close, so some people are starting to feel like really something might be happening for their campaign. Of course, now let's go back to Judy Sue to talk about some very interesting topics she has for us tonight. Judy.
Hey guys, right now let's talk about what's going on behind the scenes at the Illinois State Board of Elections. Now, almost an hour after polls have closed, joining me via Zoom is Matt Dietrich with the Illinois State Board of Elections in Springfield. Thanks so much for joining us, Matt.
Thanks, Judy. Good to be here.
So while voters have been deciding which candidates to support, you all have been very concerned about possible security threats, cyber invaders, working very hard to protect the voting system. Any issues so far tonight? Any computer glitches?
No, we've been very lucky. And actually the last several elections, we've been very lucky. We haven't had any problems reported. And one thing that we are vigilant on, and that is attempting to watch social media for potential disinformation, information that might be aimed at keeping voters away from polls, you know, things like posts saying Democrats vote Tuesday, Republicans vote Wednesday, things like that, voting by text. Haven't had any reports of those types of things here in the primary.
All right, that's good to hear. And statewide, I know we have more than 100 local election authorities, many of which much smaller than Chicago. All of them were trained and have the same access to cybersecurity resources?
That's right. It goes back to in 2018, we used a federal grant under the Help America Vote Act to establish a program called the Cyber Navigator Program. And what the Cyber Navigator Program does is it assigns a cyber navigator, a tech specialist, and they are located in 4 geographic zones throughout the state. And they work with individual election authorities. We have 108 total. And the intent of the program was to make sure that every local election authority, no matter how small the county and the county government that it's located within, has the same cybersecurity training and resources that we have here at the state level. And through the Cyber Navigator program, we can distribute grant funding for any type of cybersecurity upgrades that are needed. Our Cyber Navigators conduct training with the staffs of the county clerks. They do risk assessments and they take a look at equipment that needs to be replaced. And then through our grant program, we can help those jurisdictions get the money that they need to replace that equipment, upgrade software, make basic security improvements to their offices, anything related to cybersecurity.
Okay, and Matt, what's the latest on voter turnout statewide? Anything standing out to you besides how low the turnout is?
Well, it's really hard to tell. And from our perspective at the state level, we don't get any results from Election Day for a couple of more weeks. But we do keep a running tally, a pre-election ballot report throughout the 40-day early voting period. And I know that the Early voting thus far, we're in the mid, about 550,000 votes cast already by mail and through early voting. We're about on the same pace that we were at in 2016, but there's a big difference this year. And that is, back then, you had the vast majority of early voting being done in person, in early voting during that 40-day election period. Now we're seeing the inverse, where most of the early voting is now being done by mail. And I think this will be the election, and I'm pretty confident that in the general election we'll see it as well, where voting by mail begins to outpace early voting in person. We're seeing it somewhat in our preliminary reporting. Whether it holds up, we won't know until we do the official canvass, which doesn't come for another couple of weeks. But it does look like that the trend is going away from early in-person voting and to mail voting. I think a lot of people voted by mail in 2020, especially in the general election when we had a third of the vote cast by mail. And I think they found out that they liked it. And we now, of course, have the automatic list that you can put yourself on to receive a mail ballot with every election. A lot of voters have chosen that option, and they've stuck with it. So I think even if we end up with low turnout, you'll see that more of that turnout will come from voting by mail than possibly from voting early in person,
Matt,
which is a pretty significant trend.
Matt, one more quick question for you before I let you go. Can you explain again for our viewers who may not have heard before, there was a movement to have people write in a phrase in protest of the Middle East situation instead of voting for a presidential candidate, but that won't be counted in Illinois, correct?
No, in Illinois, the only thing that can be counted other than the box you fill in is if a write-in candidate has registered within the county that you're voting in or the city, then the write-in votes can be recognized, but anything else will not be counted. And that goes for things like people voting for Mickey Mouse and that sort of thing. You can't really register a protest vote specifically on your ballot. The only way to infer a protest vote would be at the end of the election when we have the official numbers, count up the number of a party's total ballots cast, and then how many votes for, let's say, for president, and is there a differential? You could maybe infer that there is a protest vote there, people deciding not to vote, but there could be so many reasons why they left that blank that it's really hard to tell definitively.
All right, Matt Dietrich with the Illinois State Board of Elections. Thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
All right, we'll see you in November probably, Matt. Thank you. Now back to Rob and Cheryl.
Some really interesting information there.
Thanks to both
Really
of you.
good. Well, the presidential matchup also pretty much decided before we got to the election primary today.
Yeah, and Remy Bashwal is here with us in studio as well. You taking a look at some election results coming in. What you got for us?
Well, Rob and Cheryl, thanks very much. Yeah, just right beside you over here in the other studio, and we've got our big board, our magic board right here, talking a little bit about a whole bunch of the races that you've been talking about. Let's start with the presidential race here in Illinois. And of course, President Joe Biden, we'll start with him sitting at 91.7% of the vote. Obviously, a complete, essentially, shellacking of everybody else in this case. But we were looking for some sort of evidence of any kind of those protest votes, as Judy was just talking about with her guests. We're waiting for more detail about that and where that might come in different kinds of congressional districts. But for now, you can see it has been a solid night for Mr. Biden. And the president, if you wanted to just go back in 2020, look how he won in 2020. He had 59% over Bernie Sanders at 36%. So as the incumbent now, obviously, he's got Illinois' endorsement big time. Let's go over to the Republican side. And the former president, Donald Trump, right there, sitting at 76.3%. He is, of course, wiping the floor with his opposition as well. All the other folks in this race, of course, have dropped out. Nikki Haley, Ron DeSantis. Interesting, Nikki Haley getting, 18.9, 19% of the vote right here. That may be something that you can look at in terms of analysis as to where Mr. Trump's support really is and how much movement there might be in a general election going forward. But that number is interesting. But still, Donald Trump walking away with things up and down Illinois, as you can see, his support both in the north and Chicago and Rockford, all the way to the southern part right there. The other big, I just want to tell you with Donald Trump, back in 2016. This is how he did when he ran for president the first time. So he was, what, at 39% over Ted Cruz at 30% here in Illinois. So now, obviously, 8 years later, he's in a completely different kind of a situation. We're also talking about the state's attorney's race tonight. We'll be watching that quite a bit. And that, of course, in Cook County there, as you've been reporting, the race starting to tighten a little bit right now. You can see Clayton Harris now at 46%, 53% for Eileen O'Neill Burke. We saw a little bit of a difference there earlier. You were talking a little bit about where his campaign is hoping to see some help, some more votes. That would be obviously in the southern part of the county, right in there. We expect hopefully to get more data about where these votes are coming in within the county, but that's kind of where Mr. Harris is going to be looking for some more support. So we've got all the congressional districts here we're taking a look at. One I've been watching really quickly downstate, you talked about it as well, was the 12th district downstate with Mike Bost and Darren Bailey. Darren Bailey, of course, the former GOP candidate for governor. Now starting to shrink some of this margin, but Mike Bost, who received the endorsement of Donald Trump, still walking away with it. We still haven't seen him actually being declared the victor just yet, but it's an interesting dynamic because, as you can see, this is where the actual constituency is, the whole southern part of Illinois. And again, over here to the east side, this has been all redistricted. So people over here don't really know Bost as well. So that's not coming out very well. But the fact is, we'll watch to see if there's a little bit more movement down there. But right now, yeah, we've got some interesting ways of looking at all these races here tonight. Back to you guys.
I love the breakdown, too, and taking a look at a downstate race that a lot of people are just curious about up here in the Chicago area. Robbie, thanks. I know we'll be going back to you a little bit later. Now we want to get some 4th District results, an update for you as we take a look live in real time. Looks like Jesus Chuy Garcia now with 69% of the vote, and he's the incumbent, and Ray Lopez with 31%. 66% of the precincts are in here in the 4th District, the incumbent holding on to a sizable lead. And we talked about this earlier, Cheryl, about the discussion of Mr. Lopez handing out some donuts and then some lunch money. Yeah. The Chuy Garcia campaign made a bit of a fuss about that.
And there's an investigation apparently going on. Almost triple digits here with only, of course, 66%. This is the first time that Chuy Garcia is in a race in his first primary challenge. This has never happened for him. Let's go live to Michelle Gallardo at the Ray Lopez campaign headquarters on the southwest side. How's it going there, Michelle? What's happening?
Cheryl, how are you? You know, there's about a dozen supporters of Alderman Ray Lopez gathered here at the Twisted Shamrock here on the southwest side, of course, hoping that their candidate would unseat Congressman Chuy Garcia in his attempt to be reelected for the 4th time. But, you know, this has always been a long shot campaign. There is, of course, the power of the incumbency that we have been talking about ever since the 4th Congressional District was redrawn some 32 years ago to elect a Latino to Congress. There have only been 2 men elected to the seat, and those are Luis Gutierrez and Congressman Chuy Garcia. And importantly, as you just mentioned, Cheryl, this is the first time that Garcia has faced a challenge in the primary election. And really, you know, as one of City Council's most conservative members, Ray Lopez had hoped that he would be able to present a clear alternative to the congressman's more progressive politics, particularly in some of the more conservative parts of the district, which now extends into portions of DuPage. Now, today's election, however, has been, as you've already mentioned, overshadowed by a complaint that was filed earlier today by Congressman Garcia against Ray Lopez for Lopez's choice to give out donuts and cash to poll workers to buy their lunches today. The Attorney General's Election Integrity Unit is now looking into that, but Lopez has called those allegations baseless, saying that there are more important things to worry about right now than the donuts he brought to poll workers. Certainly a distraction that was not needed today, but at the end of the day, all of this is moot. Really what matters is the votes cast, and so far, as you've already indicated, the Congressman Chuy Garcia is headed to an overwhelming victory in this Democratic primary, with Alderman Ray Lopez gathering only only around 31% of the votes counted so far. For now, on the southwest side, I'm Michelle Gallardo, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Rob and Cheryl, back to you.
Okay, Michelle, thank you.
Thanks so much for that. Let's take a look at some of the results coming in. It's about an hour exactly after the polls have been closed tonight. Let's go to the screen and take a look at some of the results in the state's attorney's office for Cook County State's Attorney, with 86% of the votes being cast so far on this Tuesday primary election night. Eileen O'Neill Burke with 52% of the votes, with more than 200,000 votes cast for her, compared to Clayton Harris III with 48% at 183,000 plus votes cast for him.
That's just tightening it up a little bit. And if you look at how important it is for voter turnout as the Democratic primary for the state's attorney's office votes are tabulated. Bring Chicago home, also a big topic of discussion going into this primary day, amending the real estate transfer tax. You see now 78% in, and 46%, over 105,000 votes for yes. No, 54%, 126,000 plus are saying no right now, as close to 80% of the election results are in there as well.
It was the last question at the end of the ballots. If you went to vote this weekend, you had to go through every single one before you got to the end. Judy talked about low on the ballot count. This was the last question, as shall the city of Chicago amend the real estate transfer tax there. And Laura Washington said early on low voter turnout would have been helpful for the yes, but it looks like no so far. But we'll see. We're also tracking the 7th District for the U.S. House of Representatives. Danny Davis coming in with 77% of the votes being cast at 52%. The incumbent going for his 15th term. Melissa Conyers-Irvin's coming in second. And rounding out the bottom 5 is Corey Marshall with 3% of the votes.
And Dan Davis holding on to a lead there. Chuck Gowdy is downtown. He's got an interview as we talk about voter turnout. He's got a guest to tell us a little bit more. Chuck?
Rob, Max Bever with the Chicago Board of Election Commissioners. We've been talking all day about the low turnout. Does it look as though this will end up the lowest turnout for this kind of election since at least World War II, or is it even worse than that?
Actually, it looks like we've got some good news. It looks like we're going to beat 2012's at least numbers of ballots cast. That was 315,000 ballots cast, and that was everything, including all the vote-by-mail ballots that came. As we are right now, it looks like we're around 343,000 ballots cast. We're still expecting maybe about 70 to 80,000 vote-by-mail ballots to come back over the next few days and be counted, all the ones that are coming in through secure drop boxes as well as through the mail. So we're going to get that turnout a bit up, and thankfully it looks like we're above 20% citywide turnout now. Now that's still pretty low, but we did see a surge, especially from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. For voters showing up on Election Day, which got us a little bit up there.
I guess not surprising, though, with a little over 20%, you've seen reductions in all age categories today, people who didn't show up across the board, from 17 to more than 75.
Across the board, that's true. But comparatively to our last few elections, the municipals and the midterms, where there was a little bit more steady between all those age groups, it's been clear since this morning that voters age 55 and up were dominating a lot of this election. And it looks like age 55 and up is around 55% of the vote right now. Now, these are unofficial totals, and these will be updated, and we'll have final turnout numbers by April 9th. But that looks like the trend for this election.
And we were talking before we went on the air that there was discussion about whether there would be a protest vote in the Democratic primary for president. Have you noticed a gap between the number of Democratic ballots taken and the number of people actually casting votes for a presidential candidate on the Democratic side?
I think that's what you're going to see a bit tonight. Now, results in all the precincts are reporting. Those will catch up. What we know is that about 221,000 people requested a Democratic ballot. So that's a number to look at and compare, say, the Democratic presidential candidates' votes against tonight. There's likely going to be undervotes. This is often common in primary elections, especially when it's a re-election. But we'll see how those numbers turn up and see if there's a bit of a gap there.
Okay, Max, thanks so much. We'll talk later. Appreciate it. The county, Cook County, also looks as though it has a little bit of a gap, indicating that there could have been a protest vote, people taking Democratic ballots and then just simply not casting a vote for the incumbent President Joe Biden. There will not be a review of people who wrote in something. Gaza, migrants, whatever the case might be. They just don't review those when it comes to a primary election like this, guys.
Okay, Chuck, thanks to you and Max. The Chicago Board of Elections doing a great job tabulating as we're getting these results in relatively quickly.
Some fascinating information, of course. As we started the show an hour and a half ago, it was only at 16%. Now it's jumped up. Some favorable news. The lines were very long, of course, when people were coming to vote tonight.
And David said he saw the line just down here at the super site. Here's some results, and we want to update you. The Associated Press is projecting, as you see that blue check mark, this is a victory, according to the Associated Press, projecting Jesus Chuy Garcia, the incumbent, has won this primary with 69% of the vote to Raymond Lopez's 31% of the vote. We saw a little bit earlier Michelle Gallardo at Mr. Lopez's campaign headquarters, pretty subdued, and it looks like Jesus Chuy Garcia is going to pull out this victory.
It's very good news for this incumbent because this is the first time in his career facing a challenger in the primary that spoke a lot of volumes. But tonight the voters made their choice, and it looks like the projected winner is Jesus Chuy Garcia, going back to Congress to represent, of course, areas of Chicago. Let's go live back to the headquarters where I imagine they're celebrating. Leah Hope, how's it going where you are?
You can always tell how the candidate is doing by how the crowd starts to swell, and we are definitely starting to see that. More people coming in, people are watching the news, they're watching their phones to see what's happening in this race. You know, a lot of folks here were volunteers and of course families and friends and neighbors of Mr. Garcia, Congressman Garcia. So we spoke with him, we spoke with Alderman Lopez earlier today about the important issues that face the 4th Congressional District indeed, but it does appear that Chuy Garcia will be the one that continues that work. And what he said was important is that he wanted to continue that collaboration. He wanted to continue to try and build support because, of course, we see that gridlock in Washington, D.C., trying to get anything done on just about anything. So he said he wants to continue that work. He said he's already built some wonderful collaborations and he wants to do more of that. So this is a sign. Even though we had the low voter turnout, he told me earlier, he said he would have liked to have seen 6 times as many people as he saw. But regardless, people did come out, and what they did say and what they apparently are saying is that they want him to continue to do that work. Here in the 4th District, as you mentioned, Cheryl, it is mainly Latino. We've got the western suburbs, Berwyn, Cicero, and then we've got the southwest side of Chicago, Brighton Park, where we are, parts of Pilsen. So there are issues, obviously, that are national issues that affect all of America, but certainly have a deep concern here in the Latino community. And in fact, where we are is a community center for those from Zacatecas, and so we're grateful that they gave us an opportunity to be in this space. I'm getting a thumbs up that I said that right. But we are seeing people coming in. We're told that the Congressman himself is actually on his way here. So he should be here in the next few minutes, and I'm sure we'll hear a big cheer when that happens. You know, he was elected in 2018 as a congressman, and you'll recall he has been in Chicago politics for a long time, born in Mexico initially, but came here as a 10-year-old and carved out this career for himself. So we will certainly let you know when the congressman arrives, but the party is building here in Brighton Park. Back to you.
Okay, Leah, it might be a night of incumbents, at least in the congressional races. A 7th congressional race, Danny Davis has approached the microphone, we're told, and is speaking. Let's see if we can listen in for a second here.
No. Down in front, Mike. No audio. No audio. No audio. No audio. Miss.
In fact, they've lifted up this country on their shoulders. But folks want to write. Isn't that a shame? We got to tell them. You got audio now? Well, I think we're at the point where we can pretty much determine that this election is over. And the victory belongs to the people. The victory belongs to, I think the other one. The one for the media is the one that you can. We could do both of them. All right, we'll do both of them. When you get to be a senior citizen, of course, you know, it means that you've taken a lot of instruction. And so it's a word to the wise. But I really want to thank all of those entities that have been a part of this great victory. It's a reaffirmation that when people have courage, when people have relationships, when people are willing to work and work across racial, ethnic, and party lines, that people work for the good of the hood, the good of the community, and all of the prognosticators, all of those who thought that the people of my community would not recognize the work that we've done practically all of our adult life. I am so affirmed that the people know the work that we've done in health care, know the work that we've done for those individuals who need assistance to bring their way back into society. For those who didn't have a place to live,
Come on now.
those who people scorned at,
All right.
the senior citizens,
Come on now. Come on now, Congressman.
the folks under the viaduct, people in the shelters, the multi-ethnic group that we work with. You know, I see my good friend Sam Ma over there from Chinatown. Sam, let me tell you, that group of business persons weathered the pandemic, never gave up on their businesses, never gave up on their community. Weathered one of the worst catastrophic events that we've seen. And much of their business is related to people coming out, going to eat, visiting and looking around. And a lot of folks had them written off. They hung tough together and rebounded. The economy now is moving. They rebounded just like President Biden say that our country has rebounded better than any other country in the world. The United States of America. So I thank all of my campaign staff, all of those individuals, all of those who have worked tirelessly, who didn't know what time to work and when to stop and when to stop. We don't have watches and clocks. We just have time. Time to do what you've got to do. But look, we glory in victory. But we also know that our country is experiencing some very challenging times.
All right.
State Senator Collins, you know it. And I thank you for your support, for your engagement, your involvement, and that of your union that you've worked with for years. People who start at one level of being and just move right on up to the top. I want to thank all of the unions, but especially do I want to thank SCIU. Especially, I want to thank the CNAs. I want to thank the health aides. I want to think that those who know that you can rise from the bottom.
Bottoms up, bottoms up, bottoms up.
Who know that you can give what you've got to give, and there will be rewards at the end.
There you go.
So we will move. We will join with President Biden. You know, I've heard people say, well, you know, Danny Davis is getting scared and he's calling in all the big guns. Let me tell you, I helped make the big guns. Yeah, I would expect the big guns to come in. Because we are a unified party. It's great to win here in Illinois. But we also got to win in Wisconsin.
That's right.
We got to win in Michigan. We got to win in other places. Because when we take the House back, I am going to become chairman on worker and family support. Let me tell you what we need to do. 2021, we reduced child poverty in this country by 50%. We want to make that permanent. We want to go back and make it permanent. If you can lift the fortunes of children, you lift the entire country. You lift everybody. We want to make sure that every child in this nation has access to early childhood education. Early childhood education, so they can keep growing, continue to develop, so that they can experience everything that their hard work, ambition, willingness to thrive is available to them. So yeah, I'm happy.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I'm delighted. And I know that my parents would be more than happy. Because we want to make sure that our young parents, our single parents, that our parents have all of what they need to really grow children who are full of themselves. The songwriter said that our children are the future. Teach them well and let them lead the way. Show them all the beauty they possess inside. Give them a sense of pride.
That's right.
We want to let the children's laughter remind us of the way we used to be.
There you go. There you go.
And so we affirm
Bring it home.
that the children, priority number one. senior citizens priority number one. We will go to the defense of Social Security, Medicare, with every ounce of energy that we can produce. And so I'm calling this a victory. It is a victory for senior citizens. My last words are, don't ever write off the senior citizens. Don't write off President Joe Biden, because he's going to lead this country where it needs to be. And I'm going to be standing right there beside him, saying, right on, Mr. President. We'll take America forward. So thank you all very much. It is indeed a pleasure. Oh, Dr. VJ in the back. How are you?
Looking at the projected winner in the 7th district here in the state of Illinois, Congressman Danny Davis, now headed to serve his 15th term, 28 years already in Congress. His last words, he said, don't count out the grown-ups.
Yeah, right. That's right.
And that's really something important, because Chuck was interviewing, Judy was interviewing as well. 40% of the people who voted tonight were between the ages of 55 and 74. Now, I don't know what he considers senior citizens, because he said don't count the senior citizens out. Age has been a topic in this year's presidential election as well.
He mentioned that too, President Biden. He talked a little bit about that. One thing that Danny Davis is probably one of the best ever at is what you just saw, ad-libbing what he thinks about, what his visions are, and you just listen to that smooth operator. So he's celebrating
orator.
tonight.
When you talk about the orators of legacies and icons, you've got the James Earl Jones, and you've got, of course, the voice of leadership. That would be Congressman Danny Davis, going now for his 15th term. He began as an alderman here in Chicago, and now he's serving our country for 82 years old. He said, you know, I've got work to do. He said he still has a, yeah, that's true. He's got goals, and you could hear people in the background, and it reminded me of when Dr. Martin Luther King made the I Have a Dream speech. You heard somebody in the background go, tell the story. She kept yelling, tell the story, and that was what Mahalia Jackson kept saying to Dr. King, and that's what led to that I Have a Dream speech. And so you can see that the people there, they appreciate the work that he's done.
Well, and you see young and old supporters standing behind him as they're excited to see him serve another term.
Yeah, he talked about young people. He quoted George Benson's song, Children Are the Future, Let Them Lead the Way. Whitney Houston, of course, remade that. And then you saw a young child pop up behind Danny Davis. So it's really been a night for him.
It has, and an early one. There are a couple congressional races we want to update you on as we wait. Chewy Garcia is expected to talk in just a few minutes, but let's take a look at the results. This is in Illinois' 6th congressional district. That district covers parts of the south and the southwest suburbs, and Democratic incumbent Sean Casten facing challenges from Manur Ahmad and Charles Hughes. And let's take a look at those results. There they are. Sean Casten now projected by the Associated Press to win handily here. 77% of the vote to 13% for Manur Ahmed. That's a big win for Sean Casten, and it doesn't look like that was terribly close either.
You know, and Laura was talking about the low voter turnout sometimes goes for the incumbent, and it seems like tonight the incumbents are winning with this low voter turnout, although we did go past the 20% range just a little bit, which is something positive to look forward to for the election.
Talk about those age groups, and Sean Casten not quite done yet, so now he'll take on Republican Nikki Conforti in the general election this November, but that's a big win for Sean Casten, the incumbent. And here's some more results here, Cheryl.
Wow, all right, 81%. The amend real estate transfer tax. Let's give the question again. Shall the city of Chicago amend the real estate transfer tax, reducing tax on portions below $1 million and increasing taxes on portions above $1 million? This isn't the entire question.
Yeah, that's the Cliff Notes version that we can fit on the graphic. I mean, that was a big concern, right? That it would be that it would be it would be too complicated. Laura Washington and Dave Greisinger are here with us, watching attentively, so you may hear them as we continue to discuss some of this. But that complication, Laura, was a big deal in this transfer tax. There was some concern that some people just wouldn't even check it.
Well, there's a complication in terms of the language. I've heard voters say they had to read it several times, and it was also at the end of the ballot, and so that might have been an issue too, that people just didn't even get that far on the ballot. And of course, it was very controversial. And I think that the opponents made the case that it wasn't just going to be a tax on the wealthy and on the folks that were buying $1 million houses or selling $1 million houses. It was going to be a tax on everyone because the tax was going to trickle down.
Right.
Yeah, some of the opponents said that it really couldn't work. What is the accountability? Plus, there are approximately 70,000 unhoused people in Chicago, and it would take 50 years to build housing for that many people because they estimate $519,000 per unhoused person. And if you calculate that, it would take 50 years to build housing. So that was one of what the opponents said about how this real estate tax would actually work. But it was a personal decision for Mayor Johnson because he said that his brother died addicted and unhoused. So it was a heartfelt personal for him. So when he looks at this, how is this going to rate? How does this look for him?
Well, he failed to lay out a plan for what he would do with this extra money. About $100 million a year is what he was estimating it would be. But there was questions about, he talked about going to social services, to building housing, et cetera. One of the criticisms was, where is all that money going to go? And is it really going to be only dedicated to homeless services? And so perhaps while it was a matter of the heart, and this may not be the last we hear of his effort to bring more resources to unhoused people, he clearly did not make the case in this particular referendum.
This was a referendum on Brandon Johnson as much as it was on this actual referendum. And I think one reason it lost is because some voters are concerned about his management of the city so far, some of the migrant crisis and how that's been handled. And they had doubts of whether or not he could handle another initiative like this.
All the votes not quite in, but it is looking like that. Liz Nagy's been covering the supporters of this referendum. Let's briefly touch base with her before we listen to Chuy Garcia. Hey, Liz.
Rob, this gathering isn't supposed to get going until about 8:30. You can hear the music has come up, and there are a few people who have come into the room. One of them is Alderwoman Maria Haddon, who was a champion of this Bring Chicago Home referendum. She was one of the people in City Council who was really pushing ahead with it. But the few people that are here in this room are not just people who supported the Bring Chicago Home real estate transfer tax increase. They are people who were responsible for putting it on the ballot. They are people who heavily campaigned for it. Now, this has been a pet project of the progressive movement here in Chicago for years. I just spoke to the ladies who are sitting at this table behind me a few minutes ago, and they said they're still hopeful there may be some numbers out there that could perhaps even this out. But they did say they're frustrated. They feel a little defeated by this. They were really hoping, they said, that this was the opportunity to get some money funneled into social services and a way to get some of the unhoused people in Chicago off the streets. Now, of course, they had run a very active campaign, both sides, on this issue. The people who were for it and people who were against it spent millions of dollars trying to get voters to go their way. Laura Washington had mentioned several times that perhaps because of the low voter turnout in this race, that she thought that this may pass because this had the backing of Mayor Brandon Johnson. It had the backing of the Chicago Teachers Union. Well, this, of course, was fought out in court as well. Many of the real estate groups tried to keep this issue off the ballot. They were unsuccessful in doing so. They said if it passed, they were considering taking it back to court because they have maintained that this confusing question, this three-part question on the ballot, was unconstitutional. They say you can't ask about a tax increase and a tax decrease within the same question. So we're going to continue to watch how things play out here. But so far, for people who supported Bring Chicago Home, it is not looking like it is going to turn out the way they'd hoped. Rob and Cheryl.
All right, Liz, you've been covering this story for the past couple of days, in depth, really great information, and so much to talk about. So much money was spent on both sides of the issue, as Liz said. And tonight, somebody's going to be disappointed because for some, it's a hard issue. It's a kind issue. Others were talking about from a financial standpoint.
It was a touchy subject, no matter what side you were on it. That's true. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of feedback in the coming days. We want to take a look at the 4th congressional race before we hear from Chuy Garcia. There it is. Chuy Garcia, the projected winner at 69% there, 23,000 plus votes cast for him. Raymond Lopez, the current Chicago alderman, coming in at 31%, just over 10,000 votes for Ray Lopez. So this was got a little Chicago politics type in the morning, like it this morning with Raymond Lopez out talking to supporters and also giving election judges some donuts and then some money for lunch.
Donut Gate, they were
Donut
calling
Right,
Gate.
is that
There you
Donut
go.
Gate?
Yeah, Laura's got Donut Gate. We'll coin
Yeah,
that
and
one.
it'll be interesting to see if the Attorney General's Integrity Unit will still follow up on the lawsuit. If, since Chuy Garcia wins, does he still go through with this lawsuit? Because is it a moot point for him? Not sure. It just all depends. You know, I called it political mudslinging. It was Donut Gate. You know, a lot of people had terms for it. I've got food fight, if you will, this afternoon.
Could have been,
So many terms. But right now we are waiting for Jesus Chuy Garcia to come to the podium. This was a challenging race for him because it was the first time he had ever had a primary challenger. And that's pretty historic for him. He's had this office for a long time. And the district, as Leah said, it covers a wide range in the city.
And this is Raymond Lopez, Alderman, trying his hand again, Laura, at another a different position in the political world.
He's ambitious, and he's run for office several times, and you're not going to see the last of him. He's been an outspoken leader in the city council, particularly on the more conservative Democrats. He's been very tough on crime. He's been very critical he was very critical of Lori Lightfoot, Anna Brandon Johnson, particularly around the whole migrant issue, whereas Chuy Garcia's position was much more embracing of migrants and saying this is a big tent, whereas Lopez was saying, you know, we can't afford this full force, this is not good public policy, and criticizing Joe Biden, his own president, for not doing a better job at the border.
And Jesus Chuy Garcia, at one time, David, a mayoral candidate himself, has now found success working for the United States Congress.
Absolutely, and there were questions after losing the mayoral race, how strong he would be. It's interesting, it's turning out to be a great night for these incumbents in what we thought might be contested races. Chuy Garcia wins by almost 40 percentage points, Danny Davis by 30 percentage points, Bill Foster by almost 60 percentage points, Sean Casten up there too, Mike Bost in the downstate race by 22 points. We thought that possibly could be a close race, so it's a great night for incumbents.
It's so interesting. You talk about the incumbents. Danny Davis, the last time he ran against Keena Collins, they only separated by 6 points, but tonight it is a wider margin. What do you think the reasoning is for that?
Well, the race is much more crowded this time around. There's an anti-Danny Davis vote out there for sure, especially perhaps among younger voters who feel like it's time for him to move on. But those other candidates were splitting up that anti-vote. Keena Collins didn't have it all to herself this time around.
Yeah, he was endorsed by Governor Pritzker, endorsed by Congressman Jonathan Jackson, and of course, Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle as well. So they asked her earlier in the evening, they asked Clayton Harris III, was she a kingmaker? What do you all think?
I heard Craig ask that,
Yeah.
Well, that's a good person to ask. I don't know if he's going to slip through this time, and so she definitely has clout. She's the head of the Democratic Party of Chicago. When she and the party endorse, it makes a big difference, but it's not an automatic win.
Yeah, the race for Cook County State's Attorney, one of the big races that we've been keeping an eye on for you all day, one of the more talked about ones, as well as the referendum, brings Chicago home. And that State's Attorney's race, pretty close. And that was a Preckwinkle obviously coming out staunchly in support of her candidate, and whether or not that's going to pay off, it's really tight.
Well, I think Kimberly Fox, the current incumbent, is a factor there. Obviously, she was a protege of Tony Preckwinkle. Tony Preckwinkle helped elect her to office. She has been very controversial, and at the very last moment, Fox came out and supported Harris and actually endorsed him. That could have been a problem for him because he wanted to differentiate himself, to say, I'm for criminal justice reform and I'm also for fighting crime, whereas his opponent was very effective at talking about, we've gone too far, Fox has not done a good job, we need to pull back. So that the connection to Fox, the connection to Tony Preckwinkle might not have been helpful for him with the more conservative voters who are more concerned about crime.
At the end of the day, was this a race, a referendum on Kim Fox?
I think so. I think Kim Fox decided not to run for re-election, and I don't know what her personal decision was behind, but she would have had a very tough time getting reelected because of all the controversy around how she's handled criminal justice reform in that office.
I'm really curious to hear the breakdown on the demographic for that race and also some of those suburban voters in Cook County, David. Is that going to be enough to swing this to Eileen O'Neill Burke's way?
That might be a factor. There's also the problem of crime in the city of Chicago. And she, without directly attacking Kim Foxx, she went after some of the approaches that Kim Foxx has taken. In some measures, they were very similar, but she's going to go harder after the retail theft rings. And she was critical of the fact that the Kim Foxx wouldn't prosecute for any theft below $1,000. The law allows felony prosecution for $300 and up. And it looks like there could be a new sheriff in town when it comes to that kind of law enforcement.
That was a big talk. I mean, that was a big part of this campaign for sure. Illinois State Supreme Court race. We want to take a look at those results for you. We'll put them up on your screen. There they are. This is Joy Virginia Cunningham with a huge lead. This is the first time we're seeing this on the big screen. What does it look like? 90% in?
90% in. And for Joy Cunningham, this is only the second African-American female to serve on the Illinois Supreme Court. Once again, an incumbent here in this position. So the incumbents seem to be doing well tonight across the board. And that will be a conversation tomorrow to see exactly the analysis of how that actually is working, because some people want change. Some people say you've been around too long, but tonight the incumbents are doing well. Now to the 11th district, we got a check mark.
There you go. That means projection there that Bill Foster's going to do it.
Yes, with 23% of the votes already casted, and they have a check mark. And of course, you've got the incumbent once again, Bill Foster, winning single-handedly with a large margin over Qasim Rashid in this race in the 11th district.
And there were a lot of candidates in this race. On the Republican side, 3 in particular, and let's take a look at that. Here's the 11th district Republican primary. Jerry Evans has 49%, just over 8,000 of the votes, and Susan Hathaway Altman coming in at 39%. With about 6,400 votes. So the winner of that primary will take on Bill Foster, it appears, as Bill Foster tries to become another incumbent for the state of Illinois, particularly in the Chicago area, congressman who will continue to keep his seat there. Yeah.
Wow. All right. A lot going on tonight, and really some interesting. So what are your thoughts on all of this, the Illinois Supreme Court, of the 2 races that we just talked about? What stands out to both of you?
Well, the Supreme Court was interesting because that came down to an issue of racial equity. Jesse Reyes was making the case that there had never been a Latino on the Supreme Court, and that Latinos are one of the fastest growing populations in the state. Joy Cunningham came back and said, you know, I'm a sitting justice. It's important for me to have that 10-year term because she was appointed, and because she was an African American. So they both were appealing to their racial and ethnic constituencies.
Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia has now approached the microphone. Let's listen in.
Esta serie de triunfos para nuestra comunidad y para nuestro futuro. What a night for democracy and for our communities and our movement we celebrate tonight.
We did.
Tonight we showed everyone across the country paying close attention to this race that hate and the right wing attempt to hijack our movement will not succeed. And what started 41 years ago as a movement for political empowerment tonight continues to celebrate progress and achievement. So to those questioning what we've been doing for the past 40 plus years, look around you, look in front of you, look on the side of me. It's a diverse coalition of leaders rooted in communities and advancing a progressive agenda for working families. That is our effort. And we've elected leaders to Congress, we've elected leaders to the Senate and the House, countywide and county districts, to the City Council, and to the judiciary in growing numbers, and we celebrate them here tonight once again. In sub-circuits, but as well as countywide elections. It didn't happen overnight, and we suffered a few defeats along the way. it takes quite a while to dismantle a bad Chicago machine, but we have done it on the Southwest side, and it's inspired people all over Chicago. And now we are here with the same spirit of resiliency, saying it loud and clear. Our movement is strong, our movement is bold, and we are progressive, and don't forget it, we are effective. We have delivered for our communities. We have defended and will defend our communities. We have fought back against hate and division, and we've come together and uplifted each other, especially in our greatest time of need. That is what we are about. The legacy of Harold Washington, Rudy Lozano, and many others is alive tonight, and we're not done yet. And there is a clear attack against immigrants, against women, against African Americans, against Muslims and Arabs, and the LGBT communities. What that should tell us is that we need to stand strong together and united. Our work together will be tough, but we are tougher, and we've demonstrated it time and time again. We will not back down because we know what is at stake. Our priorities are not just talking points. They are commitments to communities and to ourselves. It's time that we create an economic opportunity future for working families and to lower the cost of living for all of our people. People should not have to work to live and live to work. People should be able to retire with dignity and grace and their families. And it's time that we continue the effort to create more jobs, and jobs that pay a good living wage and offer the guarantee of a good retirement. It's time to make health care a human right in this country and to reduce the cost of that care and of medicine. And Democrats in the U.S. Congress are committed to doing that. We're going to be working not just on lowering the cost of insulin, as we've done already, but to make that cost lower for everyone who needs it, but to also begin on that longer list of medicines that people need for their quality of life and their well-being. And in the area of healthcare, it's time to codify women's right to reproductive health care as well. And we begin that work in Washington tomorrow morning. And it's time that we truly invest in the care economy, from child care to home care to the care for the elderly and those that we love the most. Those who care for them should be compensated adequately and have a future for retirement as well. And it's time that we get really serious about gun violence and the epidemic that's plaguing our communities across the land all over the country. It's destroying too many lives. It is time to act. We must build on the modest legislation that we passed at the end of 2022. We ought to have additional gun control measures, and we ought to ban assault weapons in America.
All right, we are going to take a quick pause right now tonight to let our on-air audience join us. We'll be right back after a very short break, everybody.
From ABC 7 Eyewitness News, your voice, your vote. This is a 2024 primary election update.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. We have more primary results coming into our newsroom.
And looking at the so-called Bring Chicago Home referendum, look at that. So far, the majority of voters are saying no to the change to the real estate transfer tax.
Now to the Democratic race for Cook County State's Attorney Eileen O'Neill Burke still has a lead over Clayton Harris III.
Those are the numbers there in the Democratic 4th Congressional District race. The Associated Press has declared incumbent Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia the winner, beating challenger Chicago Alderman Raymond Lopez.
Of course, we continue to follow the results for you tonight. Be sure to head to our website or scan the QR code right there on your screen for continuous coverage of tonight's primary races.
You can find the latest results, live reports from campaign headquarters, and a whole lot more. Join us over there. We've still got a lot of coverage for you tonight. And welcome back to our special election night coverage on our ABC 7 stream. We want to go back to Congressman Jesus Chuy Garcia. He has been addressing his supporters as he has been the projected winner. Oh, there he is. He's talking to a lot of folks and doing some hugging.
This is his wife. I thank you from the bottom of my heart to all of the wonderful volunteers who have come out year after year, time after time, to stand up for unity, to stand up for the best values of our country. And of course, I thank this coalition of young people. This is what young leadership for the future looks like. This is what leadership rooted in community and committed to principle looks like. And we join together with our fellow dwellers in Chicagoland to say we can build a better nation when we uphold the great traditions that have made America the land of opportunity and justice for all. Thank you so much for being with us. Muy buenas noches a todos los voluntarios y voluntarias que se encuentran aquí esta noche. No voy a repetir todos mis comentarios en español, pero sí les quiero dejar saber tres cosas.
Thanking his supporters in Spanish and English tonight. It has been a long journey for him. He went all the way back to his roots with Mayor Harold
You heard
Washington,
that reference, yeah.
when they made history together. And then fast forward to 2024, here we are, facing his first primary election challenge in his career. He pulled it out. The incumbent wins tonight.
Yeah, Laura and I were doing the math, and he was a young man when Mayor Washington was here.
Well, Congressman Danny Davis, don't count the grown-ups out.
That's right.
Okay?
No, I won't.
Danny Davis was with him from the beginning.
Yeah, Danny Davis, great point. Danny Davis
Oh.
both there. Judy Sue has a guest, and we want to join her.
Yeah, hey guys, I am now joined by Grace Chan McKibben. She is the executive director of the Coalition for a Better Chinese American Community, really instrumental in Chicago now having its very first majority Asian American ward in City Council. Always good to see you, Grace.
Good to see you, Judy.
All right, so we have been sitting here watching the results come in, listening to the speeches in the congressional race, the incumbents here getting another term in office. What does that mean? What are your thoughts on that in terms of the issues important to the Asian American community?
Yeah, I think it's great that Chuy Garcia and Bill Foster and Danny Davis had won so early. They've been longtime friends of the Asian American community. I know that incumbency definitely helps, but I think that because they've been supportive of Asian American issues, we're happy that they've won.
I want to ask you about a particular race. I know you have been watching this very carefully. This is in the state representative contest in the 24th district, which includes Pilsen, Bridgeport, and Chinatown. The incumbent here is Teresa Ma. She is, of course, the first Asian American elected to the Illinois General Assembly, facing two challengers here. We can pull up the results for you right now. Obviously, Teresa Ma leading this race, but she had two challengers in this race, really challenging her more progressive records. Are you seeing a shift here in the sentiment?
Sure. I mean, there is a Republican challenger, which Teresa will have to face in the general election. But the Miss Eng, Lai Ching-eng, is definitely running to the right of her. She had criticized Ms. Ma for being supportive of the migrant base camp in McKinley Park. She had also criticized her, I think somewhat unfairly, for raising property taxes because Representative Ma doesn't have anything to do with property taxes. So that really shows how the Asian American community is really conscious about cost inflation, just like everybody else. We all know that prices have gone up and income hasn't really kept up. And but you've seen it pretty acutely in the immigrant community and in the Asian American community.
And now looking ahead to the November general election, I know earlier we talked about the Latino vote, how it is not a block, and neither is the Asian American vote. It is a very diverse, population under that umbrella of Asian Americans. There was a recent report from the AP and AAPI data. It actually showed that nationwide inflation is the top issue for Asian Americans, followed by immigration. Your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me that inflation is a top priority for Asian Americans. There are lots of small business owners, and then new immigrants typically may find themselves in jobs that pay lower. So there's definitely that consciousness about their income not keeping up with prices, as I just mentioned. And the immigration is very complicated because whereas many Asian Americans are supportive of the country supporting all immigrants, there are also people that feel like, oh, I came here legally, and we shouldn't be supporting people that did not come through the same channels.
It is very, very complex indeed. Grace, thank you so much for your time tonight.
Very
Thank you for joining us and watching the results, sitting right here with me watching the speeches. Thanks so much. All right, guys, back to you.
Ladies, thank you so much. We want to talk about the updated results of the Cook County State's Attorney race. Let's take a look at the numbers, if we can put those on the screen for you, because we're getting more results in, as this remained a pretty close race here as more and more of the precincts have reported. And now 91% are in.
Yeah, polls have closed for about 2 hours now. It's been pretty consistent throughout the night. Eileen O'Neill Burke has been winning most of the night, 52%, with more than 219 votes cast on her behalf, compared to 48% for Clayton Harris III, the lecturer at the University of Chicago. First time running for this political office. Let's go live to political reporter Craig Wall tonight, who is at the Clayton Harris III campaign headquarters. What is the mood there, Craig?
Yeah, there is certainly a sense of nervousness here, but also kind of waiting and watching and trying to figure out where the latest numbers are coming in. I want to show you a picture that we got just a short bit ago of Clayton Harris III, his wife and two sons. They're in a back room here watching the results coming in, and there is no one more anxious to see more of the numbers come in than he and his family, as well as his advisors. There are a number of people here who are in the back room there, most of them hanging out, just waiting. They're obviously watching these results very, very closely. They were hoping for the support from Cook County Board President Tony Preckwinkle to help swing things his direction. But right now, the numbers are not looking good, but there's no concession speech coming anytime soon. I want to bring in a special guest right now, State Senator Robert Peters, an ally. And give me your take right now on what these numbers mean for the campaign at this point.
Yeah, I mean, what it means is that we're waiting for the South Side to come in. Plus, we have a huge tranche of vote by mail that we're, sort of waiting on. So we're kind of in a waiting period right now. My hope is, obviously, as a supporter of Clayton, that we see these numbers break our way. But we're just in a holding pattern, a waiting pattern. I believe the AP hasn't even called this race. It just goes to show how close it is.
Yeah, and when we were chatting earlier, you mentioned there's an estimated 40,000 mail-in ballots that are coming in. Why does that give you some hope? You're down about 16,000 votes with the latest numbers. Why do you think that there's still hope in those mail-in ballots?
I think between mail-in and these outstanding Southside numbers, that if they break your way, right, with the fact that that's more likely to be his base, that shifts what happens in terms of these results. And so the other part about this is the fact of the role of the party, right? It can play an important role in moving voters, particularly Southside voters. So we're in a waiting pattern, a holding pattern, and my hope is that it breaks our way.
And you'll be waiting and watching. Is 16,000 at this point too much to overcome?
Well, let me just tell you something. I'm not one of those people who believe anything's too much to overcome. Obviously we would prefer to be in the other direction, but here's where we are at. We just got to wait. We got to see what happens. But my hope is with those South Side votes coming in, that can turn the tide.
You had a chance to talk to Clayton a little bit earlier when the numbers were still kind of the same. Describe for me how he is feeling at this point, do you think?
I think it's amazing that Clayton is one of the most energetic and optimistic people I've ever met. The fact that he's taking on this job, which we all know is a very tough job, he doesn't see it as a burden. This is something that he's excited for, and you can feel it, and I love that. It's amazing, it's infectious, so yeah.
And he'll obviously hope for the best as things go. That's the latest here from the Harris Campaign headquarters. Going to toss it back to you guys right now as they wait and watch the results, just as we are doing.
And we'll try and join Sarah Schulte here in just a few minutes as well at the Eileen Burke headquarters. We want to go to Rob Hughes live at Spiropoulos' event in the Greektown neighborhood. Well, oh, let's listen in. She's speaking.
Dave Millay. Daniel Rood, my field coordinator. Meredith Hammer. Tahani Hill. Best Anley. Robert Jones. Commissioner Frank Aguilar. And many, many more. So I'm going to be reaching out to everybody these coming days to say thank you and to talk to you about everything that we've done together and how we're going to proceed forward. The office of the Clerk of the Court does not attract intense news coverage despite what you see here tonight. It doesn't attract super PAC support or thousands of online donors. For years, aspirants to this office viewed it as either a stepping stone to higher office or as a ripe opportunity to build a patronage army. It's not easy to convince volunteers and donors that this office matters to them. I'm here to tell you that it does matter. It matters to defendants, victims, attorneys, public defendants, prosecutors, all of whom have a vested interest in seeing our system run effectively.
Yes, yes.
And I would like to thank Local 700 for supporting my campaign. It matters to people seeking orders of protection who expect those orders to be processed efficiently and delivered to the sheriff, and those seeking safety from violence understand that Cook County government is there to help them during their most difficult times.
Yes.
It matters to people who are transgender or non-binary that they interact with representatives of our systems of justice who understand that their identities don't always fit in a simple checkbox.
Yes. Yes.
And it matters to every single resident of this county, all of whom want to live in safe communities. A well-run court system is a small but crucial part of delivering justice.
Yes.
It took a lot of hard work to get to this point. I ran on a platform of transparency, reform, and accountability.
Yes.
And I intend to keep the promises I made on the campaign trail. As commissioner on the MWRD, I introduced an independent inspector general to provide oversight of the district. And as president and the finance chair, I established fiscal responsibility by helping to maintain the district's AAA bond rating.
Yes.
As clerk of the court, I will bring the same level of oversight. Step one will be updating the aging website and the e-filing system. Most people facing a judge can't afford their own attorney, so they represent themselves.
Right.
And I will ensure everyone interacting with the court's website has equal access to justice. I will make the website more user-friendly and interactive and offer a live chat for questions. I will lower the cost of using the people's legal system by simplifying and lowering court fees. I will begin digitizing all court files, saving millions of dollars in paper storage for the taxpayers of Cook County. And as clerk of the court, I will not accept campaign contributions from employees. employees of the clerk's office, and I will hold staff accountable to the highest ethical standards. I will fight corruption, expose and end misconduct in the clerk of the court's office. I will fix this office and restore trust in the courts. The people of Cook County deserve honest and competent government.
Yes.
But first, we have a general election to win.
Yes.
We are going to work hard to win in November, and we're going to work with President Biden and our nominees at the local, county, state, and federal levels to fight against Donald Trump and other right-wing extremists. And I gotta say this. I'm Mariana Sparopoulos. It rhymes with Metropolis!
What did we do? We crushed 92. 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 What did we do? We crushed 92.
I tell you, our producers know I'm probably one of the worst with pronouncing names of anybody in this building. So I am so glad.
Done a great job.
Thank you.
Did your phonetics.
You saw my
doing
phonetics.
your research yesterday, but I kept telling you, say her campaign speech.
Right.
It rhymes with Metropolis. And
I
you've
got
done
it
a
now.
great job. So we better learn that name, right?
It
Of course.
sounds
We
like we're gonna
remember
have
that
to.
name. We've got
Yeah.
to talk about it for the next 6 months or so, of course. All right. Well, let's go to live to Sarah Schulte. She is with the O'Neill Burke campaign tonight. Sarah.
Well, Cheryl, they just posted some numbers in here, and obviously a big cheer from the crowd. It has been about a 4% difference for quite a while, and tightening up a little bit with Clayton Harris, but this campaign does not think that it's going to tighten it up enough. But of course, there are still some of those mail-in ballots that still need to be counted, but this campaign definitely is confident that she will pull it out tonight. Joining me right now is one of her biggest supporters who probably, I'd say, maybe broke some ranks with some of the other Democrats in this city, and that would be 3rd Ward Alderman and Finance Committee Chairman Pat Dowell. Why did you support her?
I supported Eileen because I believe in her. I was looking for someone, I listened to my constituents, and my constituents are basically looking for someone that would focus on victims, that would address some of the issues that we see in the city, carjacking, smash and grabs, concern about crime in the city. And I was looking for someone who had the experience to really operate the state's attorney's office, someone who's been a state's attorney, a criminal defense attorney, a judge who's been on the appellate court. So that tells me that she has the chops to do this work. Someone who's got compassion, who has good judgment. And it was Eileen when I looked at the candidates that were going to be in this race.
Well, she has all the chops and has been in all sides of the courtroom.
Yes.
Do you think that she's up for managing the 2nd largest prosecutor's office in the country?
Yes. You know, management is about having the ability to surround yourself with people who can do the job, who can meet the mission that you set forth. And she just has that ability to inspire confidence in people and to get people to work with her. And so I think she's the best choice, and I'm cautiously optimistic about what might happen for her tonight.
And we're going to change subjects a little bit, but you are here. The Bring Chicago Home referendum looks like it may not pass tonight. What do you think of that, and what's the reaction to that?
You know, my reaction to it is that when people hear the word tax, I don't care what kind of tax you're talking about, a mansion tax, the tax that the state of Illinois tried to pursue in the previous elections, people get a little nervous. And so I think that's what we're seeing in the numbers tonight. I also think that there was a bigger focus on the court procedures than getting out the word about how important this vote was.
How do you characterize that? As a big defeat for Mayor Johnson?
I don't know that I would see it as a defeat for the mayor. I think that the mayor has a lot of positive accomplishments in the progressive field. And this is probably, if he's not successful here, it's just, as I would say, a minor glitch.
Very good. Thanks. Appreciate it for joining us. Meantime, again, excitement in the air. Everyone's hopeful that Eileen O'Neill Burke will pull it out tonight. Back to you guys.
All right, Sarah, thank you for that. Alderman Pat Dowell, as Sarah said, perhaps breaking with the ranks to support a candidate that a lot of people didn't think she would support. So
asking an important question there too, which is the Bring Chicago Home referendum that looks to be struggling here, Laura. And she hit on the things that we've talked about in the media, which was the confusion of this lengthy referendum, the lawsuits on again, but it's not going to be counted. And there was a lot. And then sometimes when people hear the word tax, I don't know if that applies here, but certainly they sit up and they wonder, well, what does that mean? And,
right.
And that continued with
And
this.
I think the opponents very much effectively made the case that this is going to affect you. They tell you it's only going to be over $1 million, but this is going to be passed on to you, the renters. What I heard over and over again from voters, but they were concerned as renters that this was going to impact them at a time when people are really, you're talking about homelessness, when you're talking about housing insecurity, it's not just the homeless that are really worried about this, it's across the board. We don't have enough affordable housing in this city, and people are worried that they're going to be burdened with more taxes, with more inflation. It just wasn't good timing to make that
Sure,
case.
and you mentioned earlier too about how Mayor Brandon Johnson made this such an important point of his campaign because of what's happened to some of his family members.
it was personal. And there was some very good strategic ads. This is a story about perception and reality. And what those ads did, what made you think, it was already litigated before the vote took place in this primary election. Some people thought their rent was going to be high. There was going to be vacant buildings. It depended on what you see, hear, and think. That always, it is a personal and emotional vote. Because are you going to give money to help the unhoused? We've got 20,000 estimated unhoused CPS students. People were thinking about, can we help them in a city where there is money? So it depended on how you felt. Like I said, perception and reality with those ads. The ads were very effective on both sides.
Well, when Mayor Johnson came out with this idea, it was presented as tax the rich, but the ads on the other side made it a much more democratic issue of it's going to affect people across the board, people who are renting in particular, and it almost was cast in that respect as sort of a regressive tax because renters don't have any choice. And this is a tax that hits only people who sell their houses, but renters have to pay rent every year. And if their landlord raises the rent because of this tax, that's where it could really hit home.
And I think the other argument that really resonated was that there was no concrete plan on how that money was going to be spent. Hundreds of millions of dollars you're talking about that was going to be collected. But you know, when the mayor and their proponents talked about social services, they talked about creating more affordable housing. But I think there was a lack of confidence that the city hall could handle this project right now.
Our Liz Nagy, a reporter, broke that down earlier, that there was still a ways to go after this process. How would the money be spent? What would happen there as well?
Right, it was a binding referendum, and then it would have gone back to the city council. The city council would have to vote on an ordinance. So there was process, but I don't think this is over. I think there's going to be further conversation and maybe restructure the way that it's talked about.
It could be, but this is a pretty big setback. Just like Governor Pritzker with that graduated income tax loss, he hasn't gone back to the well there. The only other case out there that really compares is Los Angeles, which in its first year thought they were going to come in and bring in almost $1 billion, $950 million. They brought in just a little less than, or a little more than $100 million. So there are also questions about, is this really the pot of gold that Brandon Johnson presented it as being?
Ravi Vaishwal with us in studio tonight, taking a look at some other numbers. We want to check back in with him over at the board. What's going on, Ravi?
Hey, Rob. Hey, Cheryl. Great job by all of you guys, and incredible insight. And we just want to take again a look at what's going on nationally. Remember, it is a presidential primary. Very quickly, President Biden walking away with the Democratic nomination here in Illinois. And former President Trump for the Republicans sitting at 80% now. As you can see, solid support up and down the state. This is a lot bigger a number and a bigger margin over Nikki Haley than he had earlier. Of course, all the other folks have dropped out. So this is kind of fait accompli, but you can see President Trump doing very, very well here in Illinois. And one place that he's going to be looking for help and for a lot of support in in the general election come the fall is downstate, obviously. Here is a very interesting constituency. This is the number 12 congressional district in Illinois, the whole southern part of the state, really, right there. And you've got, what happened was there was a redistricting here because in the last census, actually, Illinois lost one congressional seat. So there was a redistricting. And what we have is the incumbent from nearby, Mike Bost, in there in the 12th district. And he's up against Darren Bailey. You remember that name. Darren Bailey was the GOP candidate for governor in the last round against J.B. Pritzker in 2022, and he lost that time. And he had actually gotten Donald Trump's support back for that gubernatorial race. This time, though, Donald Trump endorsed Mike Bost because he said that he was going to be going with people who had supported him to begin with, even earlier in President Trump's political career. So Mike Bost, who's very well known in the southern part of the state and in the GOP conference, doing well on the sort of the older part of the constituency of the congressional district. But then on the right side, on the east side, as you can see over here, Darren Bailey is doing very well in this area, just in here. And the fact of the matter is this race has actually got a little bit wider right now, but it was closer earlier. We'll see what happens. We've got about 70%, 80% of precincts reporting. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Darren Bailey and what that says about the kind of support that Donald Trump has in Illinois. Back to you guys.
All right, some really good numbers there. Thanks so much for sharing that with us. Let's go back to Judy Su. She has Dr. Twyla Blackman-Larnell here representing Loyola University with some conversation on results tonight. Judy.
Yeah, that's right. Professor Larnell back with me again today. And if you read, she's a political science professor at Loyola right here in Chicago. She's done a lot of work in the area of urban and local politics. And by the way, if you read the students' feedback online, she's also a very popular professor. So thanks for being here tonight. I know you have been in the green room watching the results, watching the speeches. What is standing out to you so far as you're watching the returns?
Well, it's interesting seeing how people are talking so positively about this winning streak of incumbents tonight. And in all honesty, it might not actually be a good thing talking from the standpoint of Democrats and democratic politics and political participation.
Why is that?
Because we're seeing a lot of younger folks, and not just 18 to 25-year-olds, but it's looking like young adults, 25 up to 40 also, that kind of are staying away from the polls. And I'm really interested in seeing the racial breakdown of the voters who turned out as well. Right? I'm expecting that we see people who are not happy with Joe Biden's, particularly his policies towards Palestine right now, that wanted to stay home. I was expecting a substantial number of moderate and white liberals to stay home too in terms of voting for Trump, but low voter turnout in that presidential race seems to really have trickled down to even less turnout at these lower level races. And yeah, older folks seem to have been overwhelmingly represented tonight and leading in the
yeah,
same
well, one race that has not been called, the big one, the Cook County State's
Yes.
Attorney's race, so it's still too tight right now to be called. The candidates had a debate right here in the ABC7 studios. What are your thoughts on that race so far? Do you think they were answering, really addressing the concerns?
Yes and no. I think that this is a really interesting race because there is no clear pattern of who is supporting Danny Davis versus his contender at this moment. And a big reason for that is crime is all over Chicago. Everybody's being impacted by crime. Fear of crime was increased when, we had the state policies ending the cash bail bond system, right? And everybody's talking about a purge is coming. And we're seeing high-income white folks talking about this to lower-income individuals talking about this purge. They're really worried. But then now you have the migrant crisis coming along as well. We're recognizing that there's an even bigger struggle for resources, and people are really worried about crime. And I do think that what we're seeing tonight is a referendum on the more progressive criminal justice policies we saw under Kim Foxx, and some of everybody is a little bit unnerved. And so it's unclear if Danny Davis is just pushing a very strong black constituency or just the more progressive constituency, right?
You mentioned Danny Davis. You mean
Clayton Harris.
I apologize. That's okay. Danny Davis won. We sat there and watched his speech.
A very interesting race also.
Earlier. But I do want to ask you also about the 4th congressional seat. That race has been called. Yes. However, that debate, it framed an interesting debate, right, between Chuy Garcia and Ray Lopez about the migrant situation and the larger immigration policy. What is the impact going forward in the November election?
Right. This is a really interesting discussion as well, because people don't give credit to racial groups for being diverse in their perceptions. And so we do see Chuy Garcia as being more liberal, more progressive, right? And his opponent not so much. And with the migrant crisis coming, we saw many folks in the Latino community, particularly in their district, that were a little bit unnerved by having outsiders in their space, and also worried about, again, this contention for resources and things of that nature. So I was kind of surprised to see that Chuy came out with twice the number of votes, because we just expect to see more people turn out, given so much of the anger and the negative and oppositions toward the more recent policies from our progressive leaders as it relates to the migrant crisis.
All right, looking ahead to November, hopefully the youth vote will turn out a little bit more. As you sigh.
I mean, it's really hard because they're all so upset. Everybody has so many things that they want to talk about and so much change they want to see, but it's bothersome that nobody's turning out to vote to really actually see those changes, which says something about how our young people or Americans in general are feeling about our electoral system.
It's interesting. You probably talk about that with your students all the time. All right. Thank you, Professor Larnell, for your time. Always interesting having you here. Guys, back to you.
Yeah, thanks, ladies.
All right. Really some fascinating topics of conversation from the youth perspective, too, coming from the professor.
Yeah, it's a huge discrepancy, and it matters when there's such low turnout like there was here in the Chicago area.
And a term that's been circulating a lot, people call it grief voting and grief campaigning, because people are grieving. The professor talked about people are angry, there's opposition from the progressives, and people are voting based on how they feel emotionally. Yeah. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens in the next 6 months.
Not lost faith in the younger generation. Both of my kids can vote.
Right.
And both of them did. Michelle Gallardo with the Ray Lopez campaign.
Good job, Dad.
Yeah, I don't know if I did it. My wife Wendy probably did. 4th Congressional District. Michelle is at the Lopez campaign with more for us. Michelle.
That's right, Rob. You know, Alderman Ray Lopez just conceded the election a few minutes ago, addressing his supporters gathered here at the Twisted Shamrock on the southwest side, calling his campaign for the 4th Congressional District the little engine that could. Now, this was, of course, always considered something of a long shot candidacy, the power of the incumbency being what it is, and yet it is significant because it is the first time that Congressman Chuy Garcia has faced an opponent in the Democratic primary since he was elected in 2018. Now, while still a Democrat, Lopez's more conservative politics presented a clear alternative to Garcia's progressive position, something that he had hoped would help him, especially in some portions, suburban portions of the district, particularly in DuPage. Today, however, a last-minute distraction with Congressman Garcia accused Lopez of handing out donuts and cash to poll workers. Lopez saying it was nothing more than lunch money. Joking about the controversy this evening, Lopez's first words to supporters were, "Want a donut?" before he went on to say about his defeat.
Because this isn't about me. This is about the people of the 4th District. This is about showing that leaders can disagree and yet still come together even when they've been at odds with each other. And I think there are many things that we can focus on, that we need to focus on.
Now, in the end, the alderman did get just about 31% of the vote, something he said he was tremendously proud of, considering it is the first time that he has run for Congress. He did finish his remarks, not just thanking his supporters, but promising them that he will be back, but not before a good long break. Live on the southwest side, I'm Michelle Gallardo, ABC7 Eyewitness News. Robin Sherrill, back to you.
All right, Michelle, thank you so much. Reporting live from Alderman Lopez's office. You know, when we went to Michelle around 7 o'clock, there was enthusiasm, excitement, and then now, of course, almost 2.5 hours later, when the results come in, it's very interesting because I always want to know, you guys come on, bring in our experts. Do you write 2 speeches in case you win or lose? Because when Mariana Spiropoulos was talking tonight, it sounded like she had already had something very prepared, her goals. Right. But do you write something just in case you win or lose, or how does that work?
Well, we've seen again and again when people lose, they sometimes still try to deliver the victory speech, but just say, we lost, but here's what we were campaigning on, and the cause moves forward. That's often what we see. So it's a retooled version. It would have to be depressing the night before an election to sit and write a concession speech.
I think politicians are generally naturally optimistic. They have to be.
Yeah.
These campaigns are so grinding and so difficult and so long. And particularly now, the presidential campaign, for example, is already started way too early. So they have to keep their energy up. They have to believe in themselves. So I think that, I think they probably go in, they go in ready to adjust, but they don't go in with, with gloom and doom.
Congressman Dan Davis just does it.
I mean,
well, he doesn't need anything in writing.
The iconic voice.
Rolls
He's been
off his
doing
tongue.
this for so long.
Yes.
I mean, he started this decades ago.
He's an orator.
Right.
He's always had a brilliant delivery.
Interesting because Sparopoulos is new to this and wants to get it right, and so you refer to your notes and address your constituents. And
Chewy was doing that too. He had notes, and he's a very experienced politician. I mean, he's held so many different offices, so he's been at many election nights.
In 2 languages, very important. He broke away as he was addressing his Spanish constituents, but 2 languages.
It's part of his appeal, of course.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
And that's the thing, you talk about the grind, and I think, Laura, for both and all of these candidates tonight, to be able to say thank you with gratitude, because the people, you don't get to these positions by yourself. Chewy's wife is standing by his side, his family. They've been through every single, candidacy for him.
Ups and the downs,
supporting I mean, it's been a roller coaster. When you become a politician, it is no for sure thing. And you do want to thank your supporters and show gratitude.
Well, Mariana Sparopoulos was going through the list
Yeah.
name by name,
A lot of them,
by name, way down into the list. And so there was some gratitude shown there.
Yeah.
You wonder the O'Neill Burke and the Clayton Harris III campaigns, what they're doing right now, because that race is still to be determined, but it does look like Eileen O'Neill Burke is doing well in that race for Cook County State's Attorney. That has huge ramifications, obviously, on so many levels, including, is it, as we've talked about this before, a referendum on Mayor Brandon Johnson, or is this about the bigger picture of crime in the city of Chicago and the concern of violence, particularly carjackings, and that has become a focal point for a lot of people in this particular election?
I think crime is the #1 issue, I think, for Chicago. Crime and migrants, and there is some relationship there. I think that you really, in order to win this campaign, you really had to be tough on crime, and that's what Burke did. She came out strong. She has the record. Clayton Harris has a very interesting background. He's had a lot of management positions. He worked for Rod Blagojevich, ran the state government for Rod Blagojevich, but he didn't have a lot of legal expertise. She had served in 2 different positions in the courts. She had been in the state's attorney's office a lot longer than he had. So I think for voters who are looking for someone who understands the criminal justice system, understands crime, I think that's one reason that she won, because people saw that in her more than in Harris.
Yeah, she spoke many times about she has seen every facet of the legal system and participated in that legal system for her entire career. She talked about being a proud daughter, being raised by a single parent, because her parent died early on, and perhaps that had something to do with why she chose a field, study of legal. And who knows what's going to happen.
And she came from a family of police officers too. I think her father, her grandfather, and perhaps even her great-grandfather had all been police officers. So she understands the whole aspect of policing as well.
And Clayton Harris tried to kind of bring back what Mayor Brandon Johnson ran on, which is going after the root causes of crime. He talked about straw purchases, et cetera. And O'Neill Burke focused on the crime that people are seeing every day and cracking down on it harder. And that may have been a differentiator.
And there you see the results, 96% in, and Eileen O'Neill Burke holding a 52% to 48%
Still about
lead.
40%. It's been 4% pretty much for the distance between them for the most part. Well, political reporter Craig Wall has been covering the Clayton Harris III campaign for this primary election series. He joins us now live with an update and the mood of that campaign headquarters. Craig.
The mood is one of watching and looking at the numbers and waiting, hoping. There is that cautious optimism we often hear people talking about, that maybe things are going to turn around. Maybe those outstanding votes are going to be coming from their precincts that will then bring these numbers closer. About 15,000 or so is the difference right now. One of the things that the campaign said to me earlier was they tied their hopes to success very much to the property tax, real estate transfer tax referendum. And with that going down by about, 9 points or so. That speaks volumes of the inability of the progressives to get their people in the Chicago area to the polls. So there's going to be some reliance on things outside, south suburbs, heavily black voters down there. There's the hope that there's going to be some of the south side Chicago black voters, older voters who tend to go to the polls. The other factor that they're waiting and hoping on is all those outstanding mail-in ballots. I just spoke to the Board of Elections. There's about 109,000 ballots that were requested for mail-in. Only about 85% or so usually come in. So they're thinking there could be 75 to 80,000 mail-in ballots still coming in, and those most of them will probably trickle in the next couple of days. So maybe they're going to wait and see if this helps out their campaign. Back to you.
All right, Craig, thanks so much for that.
Let's go to Sarah Schulte, who's with the O'Neill Burke campaign with the latest. Sarah, what's going on there?
Well, I just talked to Eileen O'Neill Burke's campaign spokesperson, and she said right now everybody is cautiously optimistic. They do believe in the end that she will pull this out. But again, as Craig just mentioned, we heard about all of those city mail-in ballots that have yet to be counted. And even though that she has led the entire night, it has shrunk. That lead has shrunk. Now it is only 4 percentage points, but even the vote total has started to shrink a little bit too. And again, the turnout has been so low. So this whole race could definitely come down to those mail-in ballots. Her supporters here, though, are still pretty positive. As I've mentioned before, she's being supported by moderate Democrats and definitely members of the business community, many who are here tonight and are really looking for a change out of the second largest prosecutor's office in the country. Many people very fed up with crime, not happy with the job that Kim Foxx has done in the last 4 years, and that is one thing that Eileen O'Neill Burke has done is she has been running as kind of the change candidate, the anti-Fox candidate. Again, everybody cautiously optimistic here. Back to you guys.
Okay, Sarah,
right,
thank
Sarah.
you. It doesn't sound like the Clayton Harris III campaign is in any position to even think about a concession tonight. They want to wait till all those votes are counted.
Well, that's the signal that they're sending. But, you know, as you pointed out, there's been a 4-point gap throughout the evening. So even if there are ballots, outstanding ballots in the mail, there's no reason to believe that that's going to change the pattern.
Yeah, you feel the same way, David?
Yeah, I think so. We don't know where those ballots come from. We do not have no data that says, oh, it's going to swing this gap that has been very persistent all night.
All right, we've got a lot more results, reaction, analysis coming up on the other side of a break. But for right now, we're going to take a quick pause so our on-air audience can join us. We'll be right back after a short break, everybody. More to come.
From ABC 7 Eyewitness News, your voice, your vote. This is a 2024 primary election update.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for joining us. The race for Cook County State's Attorney proving to be the most competitive race in this Illinois primary tonight.
And right now, Eileen O'Neill Burke maintaining her lead over Clayton Harris III. Take a look at those numbers. As about 96% of the votes are in. Sarah Schulte live at O'Neill Burke headquarters with the latest. Sarah?
Well, not a surprise. Everyone expected to be this a very, very tight race, and this race has tightened up. Even though it has tightened up, all her supporters here and the campaign are cautiously optimistic that she definitely will pull this out. But this may come all down to those mail-in ballots. The city still has dozens and dozens of those to count. So again, this is a very, very tight race, and it might all come down to those mail-in ballots. Back to you guys.
Okay, Sarah, thank you. Let's head to our political reporter, Craig Wall.
He is live at the Clayton Harris III headquarters for us tonight. Craig.
Folks here supporting Clayton Harris are hoping that things are going to turn around. They've been able to watch the numbers and the difference in the votes shrink down little by little over the course of the evening. They too are hoping and counting on those mail-in ballots that are out there are going to be able to cover this distance sometime in the next couple of days when those ballots come in. Right now they're watching. No word of any concession speech coming tonight. They're still hoping things will turn around. Back to you.
Craig, thank you for that update. Now, another big race that we're following, the Bring Chicago Home referendum. This increases the real estate transfer tax on $1 million-plus properties to help address homelessness. This vote leading a no at this hour. We'll be right back.
And welcome back to our special election coverage on ABC 7 Chicago Stream. We're glad you're still with us tonight.
Yeah, you just saw the numbers in the 7th Congressional District. Eric Hong is live for us tonight at the campaign headquarters for Melissa Conyers-Ervin's campaign.
Yeah, Eric, she's Chicago City Treasurer, previously state representative, but it looks like she has lost tonight to incumbent Danny Davis.
Robin Sherrill, during the campaign, Melissa Conyers-Ervin said that the incumbent Danny Davis had failed the 7th district, and she touted herself as an agent of change, but in the end, the voters went a different way, going with the candidate who's been in office for nearly 30 years. The 48-year-old former state representative and current city treasurer has an MBA, worked for several years in the private sector, and said she had the background and experience to bring more investment to South and West Side communities. Conyers-Ervin, who's married to Chicago Alderman Jason Ervin, touted her background as a working mother and said she would be a champion in Washington for working families. But in the end, she wasn't able to get the votes. A short time ago, she thanked her supporters.
It's been a journey worth taking.
Amen.
Right. I want you all to know that for me, yes, to be able to fight for working families, yes, and raise issues, yes, that have never been raised. My heart is full.
Conyers-Ervin faced headwinds during her campaign from a city ethics probe that found probable cause that she improperly fired 2 top staffers who accused her of misspending taxpayer funds and forcing employees to run errands for her. Conyers-Ervin has denied those allegations, called them a distraction, and they did not stop her from receiving the endorsement of the Chicago Teachers Union. She also did well in fundraising, but in the end, it wasn't enough to put her over the top. 2 years ago, she supported Danny Davis. Tonight, she comes in a distant second in this race. She did make it clear tonight in her speech, though, that this is just the beginning. She repeated that phrase multiple times. This is just the beginning, perhaps laying the groundwork for another run for Congress in a couple of years. Live on the Near West Side, Eric Hong, ABC 7 Eyewitness News.
Always looking forward, Eric. Yeah, thank you for the live update.
Let's go live now to Karen Jordan. She is at the headquarters for Congressman Danny Davis tonight. Karen.
Well, Cheryl, Danny Davis is on track to represent the 7th Congressional District for a 15th time. He handily defeated his opponents, a reaffirmation of his influence here on the West Side after coming close to being unseated 2 years ago. Now, Davis did a victory lap in his election night watch party here in East Garfield Park. His supporters cheering him on, Davis thanking them, the 82-year-old almost striking an indignant tone that his opponents made his age an issue. Davis making the case that his 28 years in Congress is an asset, enabling him to have influence in Washington. He says he's eager to keep working for the people of his community.
And so I'm calling this a victory. It is a victory. My last words are, don't ever write off the senior citizens. Don't write off President Joe Biden, because he's going to lead this country where it needs to be.
Now, 2 years ago, Davis was nearly unseated by activist Keena Collins. She ran this time for a third time, as did City Treasurer Melissa Conyers-Ervin, both trailing far behind Davis, conceding earlier this evening. That's the latest here, East Garfield Park. Karen Jordan, ABC 7 Eyewitness News. Back to you.
All right, Karen, it's a very festive mood. I heard a very familiar dance, step dance in the back, the wobble dance. That's kind of a celebratory dance that you do in the community during a family celebration, if you will, because that's seemingly what they're having is a celebration tonight at the Danny Davis headquarters. We're going to, of course, join now with our ABC 7 political analysts that are in, of course, David Greisen and Laura Washington. Thank you tonight. Let's talk about, remember when there was talk that there was artificial intelligence being used in the commercial ads for Danny Davis earlier because of his age? Yeah. They were trying to redo what he might have looked like. And here we are today, fast forward, and he wins this election at 82 years old.
Well, I think that obviously age, in his case, worked in his favor. We know that the majority, I think something like 55% of the vote that came in tonight was people over 55. That's his base, that's his constituency, particularly in the African-American community. Older black voters, they remember the days of the South, and they can still talk about the days of the South when maybe they couldn't vote or when the vote was, they were deprived of the vote. And they make sure they vote and they remain loyal, particularly to sitting congressmen. You know, the other interesting thing is that Barack Obama, as you might recall, challenged another long-time, very popular congressman a while ago, named Bobby Rush, and same kind of argument. It's time for new blood. It's time for a change, and we know what happened. That was the only political contest that Barack Obama ever lost.
Yeah, not quite time for Congressman Davis there, but you heard him, and he's a politician, right? Lifelong politician. He's cautious on what he says, David, and he specifically just heard, don't count out the senior citizens. And there are a lot of people in this general election in the United States of America, and I don't care whether you're Republican or Democrat, who want to count out the senior citizens because those are the two candidates here. One is in his 80s, the other one's going to be 80 if he wins another term. And so is Danny Davis a hint on what's to come, which is the older voters need to come out to swing this in Democrats' way, or will the young folks come out when they hear someone like Danny Davis say that?
Well, he certainly is projecting that, and he was saying, well, I won, Joe Biden can win. And it does have some logic to it, right? People are waiting in the wings for Danny Davis to move aside. He's not ready to move aside. And that's exactly the position that Joe Biden as president is in, even though he's not that much older than former President Trump. There's also the fact that when they get in front of the cameras, just as we saw tonight, both Joe Biden and Danny Davis do pretty well. Joe Biden got a lot of momentum out of the State of the Union address because there's this image being put out there of this doddering old person when in fact he gets up and he's feisty, he's pushing back as good as he gets. And so I wouldn't write off Joe Biden, just as Danny Davis told us. Pay attention to this.
Yeah, don't count out the senior citizens. I think that will be some words we will hear the next 8 months or so, because coming from Danny Davis. And he beat all of his opponents single-handedly. It was not a close race at all.
Biden campaign might be noting that to use it in a soundbite in an advertisement. You just never know. We want to go out to Sarah Schulte, who's at the O'Neill Berg campaign as the state's attorney's race is still developing there. But you see now 98% 80% of the vote in, and this has narrowed by just a few percentage points. Let's go to Sarah for the latest there. Appears we may not have Sarah.
We have been talking all night that it had been.
Oh, okay, Sarah, you there?
Oh, we can kind of hear her
I hear her
in the background.
There you are. All
Hey,
right.
Sarah.
What's going on out there?
It's a lot going on.
All right, sorry, I didn't know if I was back or not. As I don't know what you caught before, anyways. But as you mentioned, there was 98% of precincts reported. But we got to remember there are thousands of mail-in ballots that still need to be counted. So there is a chance this race may not be decided tonight. But the campaign remains cautiously optimistic. Joining me right now is the campaign spokesperson, Aviva Bowen. So what's going on? Nervous?
Nervous, but we're feeling good. We're cautiously optimistic, like you said, Sarah. We've been ahead all night long, and we're hearing from everywhere that voters are connecting with Justice O'Neill Burke's message of a strong criminal justice system, of change, of safer streets, and fair and just communities.
These mail-in ballots, does this give you any worry, or do you have any idea where mail-in ballots could be coming from?
No, I mean, the mail-in ballots that have been up through yesterday are in, so there are certainly ones that will come in later. Typically, they're going to break according to how the vote so far has come in. So, again, we feel cautiously optimistic about that grouping.
And have you talked to the candidate? Have you talked to her tonight?
I have.
How is she feeling?
It's nervous. She's run for office before. She's been elected twice as a Democratic judge, but it's nothing like this. So this is a new experience in a lot of ways. But she's feeling great. She has all four of her kids with her and her husband. So it's a family affair, and they're all watching returns the same way we are.
And not sure when we'll see her, but again, this could end up being a very late night. Back to you guys.
Okay, Sarah, we want to go to Craig Wall. He's at the Clayton Harris III campaign with the latest there. Craig?
Yeah, guys, I just talked to one of the senior advisors for the Clayton Harris campaign, Christian Perry, and I asked him, I said, what are they waiting on? What are you seeing? He says, well, we're watching the race and it seems to be tightening. And right now, I'm being told that we are expecting to hear from Clayton Harris at some point tonight. He definitely is going to come out and speak to voters. I said, what is he going to say? Is he going to concede? Couldn't get a straight answer on that, but what it suggested to me was that maybe he's going to come out and say, look, it's too close to call. And as Sarah was mentioning, there's so many mail-in ballots out there. They think that perhaps those are going to swing their way, and they're hoping that maybe there will be enough of a difference in those mail-in ballots. And that's the big question. Are they going to get about the same percentage of the mail-in ballots, or can they count on getting a much higher percentage that would make up the current gap that we see, which is about 14,000 or so votes? So we do expect to hear from Clayton Harris III tonight, but what he's going to say is still to be determined. Probably going to be one of these things. We're still waiting. We're watching. Hang in there. We're not ready to give up yet, but we'll have to wait and see what he actually has to say.
All right, Craig, make sure you have your caffeine tonight. It's going to be a long night, it appears, because if you just calculate a little bit, it's about 12,000 votes between the two candidates tonight.
Close.
And
we were doing the
earlier,
math, yeah.
We talked about there may be 100,000 mail-in votes are still out there to be counted. So potentially. And earlier when we talked to a representative from the Board of Election, they said that is going to be the trend in the general election come November, that more people will be mailing in. And we don't know if that came back from, COVID, when the pandemic, everybody was staying at home and they were mailing in when they were voting. But that is going to become the trend. And tonight, we're now at 2% between the two candidates. It was 4 all night. Now it's almost 10 o'clock. Yeah. And it's been now reduced. So they were talking about some of the areas where the votes are coming in. So
at the last count, there were about 420,000 votes counted.
Okay.
And 100,000, we've been told around 100,000 mail-in ballots were mailed out. And if 80% or so of those come back, that's almost a quarter of the total vote is still yet to come in.
Right, but you don't know who that vote will go to, and there won't necessarily be any pattern that'll be different from what we've seen throughout the night.
Sure, Craig Wall. It would not surprise me to hear Clayton Harris III is likely to come out now and address his supporters and the media. And you wonder if Eileen O'Neill Burke will also do the same thing and kind of allude to what we're saying. Let's wait till the mail-in votes are counted. But I think we'll hear from both of them or at least Clayton Harris III, according to Craig, at some point this evening.
And perhaps they'll come to speak to their supporters once again. Thank them for getting them to this part of the journey, because perhaps at 10 o'clock or tonight, there might not be a conclusive winner in the Cook County State's Attorney's race.
This is one of the few races I think we've seen tonight that have just been close.
Right.
Interestingly enough, and so I don't blame either side for wanting to wait, because 100,000 votes is a lot of votes, and you also want to honor your voters and respect them and not jump the gun, even if you think you're the winner, like in the case of O'Neill Burke.
It could go either way.
Yeah.
So who knows what either candidate's going to say. We've got about 60 seconds. We want to thank you all for your excellent and perfection in your analysis tonight, in your insight. It's always the color commentary helps, and it really sets it up and really shows exactly what's happening.
About 3.5 hours here of the streams. We've been on with you since 6:30.
It's been fun. It's great.
We're not done yet. We still have to do the news at 10 o'clock over on ABC 7. So we hope you can join us there for our continuing coverage. We'll reach out to many of our reporters who have been out at these campaign headquarters. If you're just joining us, you'll hear reaction from the winners and the losers. You're both not quite excused yet. But we do have a few minutes before we come back at 10. How's that sound?
Yeah. And we had some dessert between shows, right? We shared some brownies tonight.
I got half a brownie to share, right?
You need some caffeine. It's going to be a long night for us, but it really has been a wonderful evening, and we appreciate both of you because you have excellent insight and analysis. For now, we're going to take a short break. We're going to let our audience, on-air audience, join us, and we'll be back, everybody, in just a few minutes.
Yeah, and 10 o'clock sharp, we'll be doing a full broadcast, so stay with us. Next at 10, the fight for the Democratic nomination in the Cook County State's Attorney's race not over yet.
The controversial Bring Chicago Home referendum could be decided very soon.
And a big night for Illinois congressional incumbents. We got all the results live next at 10.